I promised you when we were kids that I would marry you. And I intend to keep that promise.
Prove it.
He had $300 million in his account, a private jet on standby, and a daughter who hadn't smiled in 4 months. But the thing that stopped Nathan Sterling cold, the thing that made a billionaire stand frozen on a cracked sidewalk in a town he'd spent 14 years running from, was a piece of paper in a dusty store window. Crayon, purple crayon, his handwriting, age 8. I, Nathan Sterling, promised to marry Emily Carter someday, because she's the only person who never laughed at me. The date at the bottom? His birthday? The day his mother died. If this story hits different for you, drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to see how far this journey travels. Hit that like button, stay until the end, because this one's going to hurt before it heals. The drive into Cedar Creek took 40 minutes from the regional airport, and Nathan spent most of it staring out the passenger window while his assistant Marcus drove and pretended not to notice that his boss hadn't said a word since they crossed the county line. The countryside looked exactly the same. That was the first thing Nathan noticed. 14 years, and the same gas station still sat on the corner of Route 9 with its hand-painted sign missing the second S in Express. The same grain elevator loomed at the edge of town like a concrete monument to a slower world. Even the smell, cut grass, diesel, something warm and yeasty that Nathan couldn't immediately identify, came through the air vents and landed somewhere low in his chest. "You want me to pull over, sir?" Marcus asked. He was 26, efficient, and had worked for Nathan for 2 years without once asking a personal question. He was asking one now, which told Nathan his face was doing something he wasn't controlling. "No," Nathan said. "Keep going." Beside him in the back seat, his daughter Lily had fallen asleep against the window, her dark hair fanned across the glass, her mouth slightly open. She was 7 years old and had her mother's nose and Nathan's jaw, and a laugh that sounded like somebody had recorded bells and played them back at the wrong speed, too bright, too sudden, almost startling. He hadn't heard that laugh in 4 months, not since the accident, not since the night everything changed and the world rearranged itself around a new, permanent absence. He watched her sleep for a moment, then he looked back out the window. Cedar Creek appeared gradually, the way small towns always do, not as a thing you arrive at so much as a thing that grows up around you. First a water tower, then a church steeple, then a stretch of storefronts that ran 3 blocks and called itself Main Street with complete sincerity. Nathan had grown up here from age 5 to 18. He knew every crack and every sidewalk. He knew which houses flooded in March, and which neighbor kept a garden that always smelled like lavender, and which shortcut through the woods came out behind the old Carter place. He had not been back. Not once. Not for his father's funeral, not for holidays, not when people called, not when people stopped calling. Marcus parked in front of the Riverside Inn, which was what Cedar Creek called its only hotel, 12 rooms, a breakfast that started at 6 and ended at 9, and a proprietor named Harold Finch who had once given a teenage Nathan Sterling a job sweeping the parking lot for $7 an hour. Nathan paid for the rooms online. He'd arranged everything through his real estate team, told no one he was coming, and planned to stay 3 weeks. He didn't know why 3 weeks. He didn't know why at all, really, except that his therapist, a cautious woman in a glass-walled office in Manhattan, who chose her words the way a bomb technician chooses which wire to cut, had said very carefully, "You need somewhere that existed before you became who you are. Somewhere that doesn't know what to do with Nathan Sterling, the billionaire." "It'll know," Nathan had said. "Then find out what it does with you anyway." He carried Lily inside without waking her. She stirred only when he laid her on the bed, turned her face toward him with her eyes still closed, and said, with the flat certainty of a half-sleeping child, "Are we there?" "Yeah, baby, we're there." She was asleep again before he finished the sentence. He couldn't sleep. This was not unusual. Sleep had become something that happened to Nathan Sterling the way rain happened to people who forgot their umbrellas. Occasionally, inconveniently, never quite enough. By 6 in the morning, he was showered and dressed and standing on the sidewalk outside the inn with a gas station coffee he'd walked 4 blocks to get. The town was quiet. A couple of pickup trucks. A woman walking a dog that seemed to be walking her. The diner on the corner had its lights on, and Nathan could see the silhouette of someone moving behind the fogged glass. He walked. There was no plan. He just walked the way you walk when you grew up somewhere, by muscle memory, by the gravity of old paths. He went down Oak Street past the barber shop where his father used to take him every 6 weeks, past the library where he'd spent entire summers because it was air-conditioned and free and nobody bothered you, past the empty lot where the movie theater used to be before it burned down the summer Nathan turned 12, and he and Emily had stood on the sidewalk and watched the fire department try to save a building that was already gone. He was thinking about that. The fire. The way Emily had grabbed his hand without saying anything and held it until the flames went out. When he turned the corner onto Merchant Street and stopped walking, it was still there. Alderman's General Store, the oldest building on Main Street according to the cedar plaque bolted beside the door. Established 1887. It had changed hands at least twice since Nathan's childhood. He remembered it being a hardware store at some point, then some kind of antique/gift shop, then closed for what felt like years. Now the front window had been freshly painted in navy blue, and inside he could see the warm yellow glow of overhead lights and shelves lined with local goods, jam jars, candles, folded quilts, wooden signs. But it wasn't any of that stopped him. It was the thing in the corner of the window, mounted in a simple wooden frame, behind glass, like something from a museum exhibit. A piece of lined notebook paper. Old. The kind with the red margin line and the 3 holes punched along the side. And on it, in the unmistakable all-caps print of a child who had just learned to write. I, Nathan Sterling, promise to marry Emily Carter someday because she is the only person who never laughed at me when I cried. Nathan. Age 8. The spelling errors were still there. He'd spelled because wrong. He'd spelled cried wrong. 32-year-old Nathan Sterling, who had signed contracts worth more than the GDP of small countries, stood on the cracked sidewalk of Cedar Creek and stared at the misspelled promise he'd made when he was 8 years old. He didn't remember writing it. He remembered Emily, remembered age 8 in 3rd grade, and the period of his life that he'd quietly labeled in his head as before, meaning before his mother got sick, before everything started pulling apart at the seams. He remembered that Emily used to share her lunch with him on days when he forgot his. He remembered that she had a gap between her front teeth that she was embarrassed about, and that he thought was the coolest thing he'd ever seen. He remembered that she smelled like her mom's bakery even at school, like vanilla and warm bread, and that sitting next to her in class had been the closest thing to comfort he knew how to access at age 8. But this promise, this specific piece of paper. He reached out and touched the glass with one finger, like he was checking if it was real. The door to the store swung open. "You're going to smudge that," said a woman's voice behind him. "I just cleaned it yesterday." He turned around. She wasn't what he expected. This was partly because he hadn't known what to expect, and partly because Emily Carter at 30 looked like someone who had lived hard and chosen to keep going anyway. And that showed on her in a way that Nathan hadn't anticipated. Not as damage, exactly, but as a kind of weight. She was carrying more than she'd had at 18. It was visible in the set of her shoulders, and the lines starting at the corners of her eyes, and the way she looked at him for 3 full seconds before her expression shifted from professional wariness to something more complicated. She was in jeans and a white apron already dusted with flour at the hem. Her hair, which had been long and loose when they were young, was pulled back with what looked like a pencil stuck through the bun. She was holding a paper coffee cup in one hand and a small cardboard box in the other, and she was staring at Nathan with an expression he couldn't quite classify. Not quite surprised, not quite anything he had a name for. "Nathan," she said, just his name, like she was confirming something she'd suspected. "Emily." He cleared his throat. "Hi." "Hi." She looked at the window, then back at him. "You saw the promise." "Yeah." "It's been there for 6 years," she said matter-of-factly. "The Hendersons put it up when they reopened the store. They found it in a box of stuff from the back room. Old receipts, some photographs, a couple of letters, and that." She nodded toward the frame. "They thought it was sweet. Put it up as kind of a town history thing." "It's my handwriting," Nathan said. "I know, I recognized it immediately." She tilted her head slightly. "I didn't tell them who you were. or who I was. Figured it wasn't my story to tell. There was a beat of silence. In that silence, Nathan heard all the years he hadn't been here. Every Christmas, every summer, every phone call that went unanswered. He heard his own absence like a frequency just below audible range, something you felt in your chest more than your ears. I heard you were coming, she said. He frowned. I didn't tell anyone. Harold Finch. The corner of her mouth shifted, not quite a smile. He texted the group chat. There's a group chat. Nathan, there's always been a group chat. She shifted the box to her other arm. I have to get back. I've got croissants in the oven. You have a bakery. My family's bakery. I took it over about 5 years ago. She glanced at him again, and something in her expression was careful now, deliberate. I heard you have a daughter. Lily, she's 7. Emily nodded, like this was information she was filing away rather than reacting to. Is she with you? Back at the inn, sleeping. Another silence. This one felt different, heavier, shaped. It was good to see you, Nathan, Emily said, and her tone was the tone of someone who meant it and also wished they didn't. She turned back toward the door. Emily. He said it before he'd made a decision to say it. She stopped without turning around. I'm sorry for... He stopped because sorry was a word that covered too much ground and also not enough ground. For a lot of things. She was quiet for a moment. Her back was to him. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the deliberate steadiness of how she was holding herself. I know, she said finally, and walked back inside. The bakery was 3 doors down from Alderman's General Store, occupying the corner space that used to be a pharmacy when Nathan was a kid. It still had the old green and white awning, which surprised him. He'd expected Emily to have redone everything, to have made it hers, but then he stepped inside for the first time 2 days later and understood. It was already hers. It had been for a long time. The front room was small and slightly crowded in the way of places that have grown organically rather than by design, mismatched chairs around 4 tables, a glass display case that needed to be replaced but held the best-looking pastries Nathan had seen outside of a Paris patisserie, handwritten menu on a chalkboard, photographs on the walls that were a mix of old family photos and some that looked like they'd been taken by customers and never taken down. The smell was what got him, though. It wasn't just bread or coffee or sugar. It was all of them together and something else underneath, something warm and specific. And it hit him low in the chest the same way the smell of the town had hit him when he first arrived, except this was more precise, more pointed. He'd smelled this before. Every school day for 10 years, sitting beside Emily Carter. You're here, said Emily, appearing from the back with her hands still dusty. She sounded neither pleased nor displeased, which Nathan was starting to understand was her default mode with him. Carefully neutral. He'd earned that. Lily wanted a muffin, he said, which was true. Lily was standing beside him holding his hand, which she hadn't done in 4 months, and looking around the bakery with the specific wide-eyed assessment of a 7-year-old evaluating whether a place was interesting enough to stay in. Emily looked down at Lily, and here was the thing Nathan wasn't prepared for. Her expression shifted. Not dramatically, not like something out of a movie, just quietly, in the small adjustments of a face loosening itself, like a door opening a crack. Hi, Emily said to Lily, crouching down to eye level. What kind of muffin do you like? Blueberry, Lily said, with the authority of a child who has thought about this. I have blueberry, Emily said, in the tone of someone reporting good news. I also have double blueberry, which is the same thing, but better. Lily considered this with appropriate gravity. What makes it double? More blueberries. That makes sense, Lily said, nodding. I thought so too. Emily stood up, and when she looked at Nathan, her expression had gone neutral again. But there was something behind it now that hadn't been there before, something softened at the edges. Sit down. I'll bring it out. They sat. Lily ate her muffin with the systematic focus she brought to all food, working from the top down, saving the best part of the base for last. And Nathan drank a coffee that was better than anything he'd had in the city, though he wouldn't have said that out loud because he suspected Emily would find a way to make it a point. After a few minutes, she came out from the back and sat across from them with her own coffee and nothing else. She didn't ask why he'd come back. She didn't ask about his life, his company, his daughter's mother. She sat the way people sit when they've learned to wait for information rather than chase it. "She's been quiet," Nathan said, nodding toward Lily, who had finished the muffin and was now drawing something with her finger in the flour dust that had drifted onto the table. "Since January." Emily looked at Lily for a moment. "How quiet?" "She talked to her teacher last week. That was the most she'd said to anyone in 4 months who wasn't me or her nanny." He paused. "Her mother died. Car accident, January 3rd. Emily was quiet for a moment. He watched her absorb it, not with the overeager sympathy he'd gotten from colleagues and business associates, not with the careful therapeutic language he'd gotten from the school counselor or the grief specialist. She just sat with it for a moment, the way you sit with a thing before you respond to it. "I'm sorry," she said finally. Simple, direct, not dressed up. "We weren't together," he said quickly, and then felt obscurely embarrassed at the quickness. "I mean, Lily's mother and we'd been separated for 2 years, but she was still—" He stopped, looked at Lily, who was still drawing. It was still a loss. For Lily, obviously. For me too, in a different way. Emily nodded. She didn't try to complete the sentence for him, didn't try to categorize the grief into something manageable. He appreciated that more than he could easily say. "Why Cedar Creek?" she asked. "Therapist's idea." "Really?" "She said I needed somewhere that remembered me before I had money." He looked at his coffee cup. "Before all of it." "Cedar Creek definitely remembers you before you had money," Emily said. "Mrs. Paulson still talks about the time you tried to sell lemonade and made it with salt by accident." "That was one time." "You served it to 6 people before anyone said anything." Nathan looked up. Emily had the look of someone who had deployed a weapon and was surveilling the results. Her eyes were serious, but there was something working at the corner of her mouth that wanted to be a smile, but wasn't sure it had permission yet. "You knew," he said. "When I was serving it, you knew." "I took 1 sip." "You could have said something." "I tried." She lifted her coffee cup. "You wouldn't stop talking about your profit margin." He laughed. It came out surprised, like it caught him off guard. It probably did. Laughter had felt like foreign territory lately. Lily looked up from her flower drawing and stared at her father with an expression of intense assessment, as if she was trying to verify that the sound had come from him. "What are you drawing?" Emily asked her. Lily turned the flower drawing toward Emily. It was unclear what it was. Some kind of structure, maybe a house, maybe a boat. Nathan couldn't tell. "It's a bakery," Lily said seriously, "but bigger, with a 2nd floor." Emily leaned forward and studied it with complete seriousness. "The 2nd floor is a good idea. You could have a reading room up there." Lily's eyes widened. "With a window seat?" "Obviously." Lily looked at her drawing, then back at Emily, and said, "I think we should build it." Emily looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at Emily. The moment had a quality he couldn't quite name, something precarious and slightly too large for the small table they were sitting at. "Maybe," Emily said to Lily, in the carefully non-committal tone of an adult who knows better than to make promises to 7-year-olds, but gently. "Maybe someday." He went back the next day. Not because he had a plan. He told himself he was walking past, that he just happened to be in that direction, but Marcus, who drove him everywhere and saw everything and kept his mouth shut about it, parked the car on Oak Street without being asked and said nothing when Nathan walked 3 blocks in the wrong direction for the inn. The bakery opened at 6:30. Nathan arrived at 6:22 and stood outside in the cool morning air, watching the lights come on inside one by one and the shadow of Emily moving through her kitchen in the back. He knocked. She came to the door with flour on her cheek and an expression that suggested she was not surprised to see him, but was not sure yet what she thought about it. "You're early," she said. "I know, sorry." She looked at him. "Are you going to stand out there or come in?" He came in. The bakery at 6:20 in the morning was a different place than it was at 10. It was all process, bags of flour, industrial mixer running in the back, 3-sheet trays cooling on the rack beside the oven. The specific organized chaos of a kitchen where someone knows exactly what they're doing. Nathan stood by the counter and watched Emily work for a while, not talking, because it was obvious she was in the middle of something and she didn't need a billionaire hovering and asking questions. After 10 minutes, she handed him a towel and pointed at a bowl. "That's the cranberry scone dough," she said. "Needs to be divided into twelfths. Use the scale. Each piece should be about 80 grams. "I've never made scones," he said. I know. Use the scale." He used the scale. He was bad at it. The first 3 pieces were off by 10 or 15 grams in different directions, and Emily glanced over and corrected him each time without commentary. Just a slight adjustment to his technique, a word or two, then back to her own work. By the 6th piece, he had it roughly right. By the 12th piece, he was within 2 grams consistently. "Not terrible," Emily said without looking up. "High praise." "I have an apprenticeship standard," she said. "Everyone who helps in this kitchen starts at not terrible and works up from there." She paused. "My last helper was Mrs. Patterson. She's 74. She makes better croissants than you, but to be fair, she's been doing it for 50 years. I'm not sure what comparison I'm being held to here." "Right now, none. You get beginner's mercy." She slid a tray into the oven, closed the door, and wiped her hands on her apron. "Where's Lily?" "Still sleeping. Marcus is at the inn." He hesitated. "He watches her sometimes. When I need—" He stopped. "When I need to not be her dad for an hour was too honest for 6 in the morning. When she's asleep, mostly." Emily looked at him for a moment. Then she turned and put the kettle on. "You have a good kid," she said. "I can tell." "She used to be louder," he said. "She was, before January, she was the kind of kid who walked into a room and immediately told you everything she'd thought about since the last time she saw you. All at once. Like the thoughts were queued up." He looked at his hands. "She's been real quiet." Emily set 2 mugs on the counter. Neither of them spoke for a moment, and the silence had the quality of a space being held open, not empty, just waiting. "Grief is quiet sometimes," Emily said. She wasn't looking at him. She was watching the kettle. "It's not always crying or falling apart. Sometimes it's just less. Everything turned down." "Yeah," he said. "That's it exactly." She poured the water, handed him a mug. "You think being here will help her?" she asked. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I think I needed to come here. Maybe that's enough of a reason." The town of Cedar Creek had its own gravitational field when it came to Nathan Sterling's return. Word spread the way it always does in small towns, not with the cold efficiency of a press release, but with the warm inevitability of a thing too interesting not to share, passed between tables at the diner and over backyard fences and in the parking lot after Sunday services. By the end of the first week, Nathan had been approached by the mayor, who wanted to talk about a potential investment in the rec center, 3 old classmates, 2 of whom wanted to reminisce and 1 of whom wanted to sell him something, and Harold Finch, who cornered him in the inn's small breakfast room to apologize for the group chat incident. "I didn't say anything personal," Harold said anxiously. "I just said a famous person was in town." "You told them my name, Harold." "Well, yes, but I didn't say anything about the. Harold made a vague gesture that seemed to encompass wealth, success, and everything uncomfortable about Nathan's life. "I just thought people should know you were back." "Why?" Harold looked at him like the answer was obvious. "Because this is your home." Nathan didn't know what to say to that. He said, "Don't text the group chat about me anymore." "Absolutely," Harold said, "unless something comes up." None of this was what bothered Nathan. What bothered him, in the way that only small true things can bother you, was that he kept coming back to the bakery, and it kept feeling like the most grounded part of his day, and he was starting to understand that this had nothing to do with the coffee or the scones. It was Emily. Emily, who treated him exactly as she had at age 8, with complete honesty and no particular deference. She didn't soften her opinions because he'd made a lot of money. She didn't ask about his company or his deals or want to know his net worth. She taught him how to make scones and told him when his technique was wrong and handed him tasks and expected them to be done correctly and did not, at any point, act as though his presence in her bakery was anything other than a minor logistical inconvenience that she was managing. It was the most comfortable Nathan had felt in years. On Thursday of the second week, Lily came with him. She was up early for the first time since January, appeared in the doorway of his hotel room at 5:50 in the morning, already dressed, shoes on, watching him with an expression that was still guarded, but also contained something alert, something awake. "Are you going to the bakery?" she asked. "Yeah. Can I come?" He looked at her for a moment. "You want to?" She shrugged, in the way that kids do when they want something but have decided to pretend they don't want it very much. "I want to see the kitchen." "Okay," he said. "Get your jacket." Emily gave Lily her own apron, which was adult-sized and had to be tied twice around her small waist and still hung past her knees. She gave her a job, separating blueberries from the container, pulling out any that were soft or broken. And Lily did it with the same systematic focus she brought to everything, arranged the rejected berries in a small pile to the side, and periodically looked up at Emily, working at the main station with the expression of someone conducting a quiet study. At 8 o'clock, when the first customers started coming in, Emily took a small baked thing from the rack, a miniature version of a fruit tart, too small to sell, made from scraps of pastry dough, and set it in front of Lily. "This one's yours," she said. "Made it from the leftover dough." Lily looked at it for a long moment. Then she said, "You made this for me?" "Who else?" Emily said, and went back to work. Nathan, at the far end of the counter, pretending to inventory the napkin supply, heard Lily make a small sound behind him. He turned around. She was crying. Not loudly. Lily never cried loudly, just a few tears going down her face while she sat completely still, looking at the small tart, with the expression of someone who has been surprised by something too kind to immediately process. Nathan took a step toward her. Emily put a hand on his arm without looking at him, just lightly, just for a second. "Wait," that hand said. "Give her a minute." He waited. After a moment, Lily picked up the tart and ate it very carefully, bite by bite, still crying a little, and when she finished, she wiped her face with the back of her hand and said, to nobody in particular, "That's the best thing I've ever eaten." Emily, head down over her dough. "I know." 2.5 weeks in, Nathan's phone rang at 7 in the morning while he was walking back from the bakery, and the name on the screen was Richard Holt, which meant the board. He considered not answering. He answered. "Nathan." Richard Holt had the voice of a man who had spent 40 years in boardrooms and had long since stopped distinguishing between professional and personal communication. Everything sounded like a presentation. "We need to talk about the Meridian deal." "Richard, I told you." "The timeline's been moved up. Apex Group is making noise about pulling out if we don't have leadership on site by month's end. That's 2 weeks, Nathan. 3 at the outside." Nathan stopped walking. He was on the corner of Oak and Merchant, directly across from Alderman's General Store. He could see the purple crayon promise in the window from where he was standing. "I'm on personal leave," he said. "I understand that." "I do." Richard's voice shifted, barely, but Nathan had known Richard for 9 years, and he could hear it, the careful recalibration. "But Meridian represents $300 million. That's not a number we can walk away from without consequences that affect every division." "Send Davies." "Davies doesn't have your relationships. Apex wants you in the room, Nathan. It's specifically—" "I said send Davies." A long pause. Not the pause of someone accepting a decision, the pause of someone deciding how to push back more effectively. "This is the kind of absence," Richard said carefully, "that boards notice." It was, Nathan knew, a polite way of saying something less polite. He'd heard this before, from Richard, from Diane Chu, from the entire apparatus of people who had built their livelihoods around Nathan Sterling being exactly what they needed him to be. "Send Davies," Nathan said again. "I'll be in contact by end of week." He hung up. He stood on the corner for a minute, looking at the promise in the window, and thought about all the things that $300 million could buy, and all the things it couldn't. Then he went back to the inn to check on Lily. He found her in the small sitting room off the lobby, talking to Harold Finch. This was unexpected on several levels. Harold was 71, with hearing aids in both ears, and a habit of filling silence with an unbroken stream of local history, and Lily had not voluntarily spoken to an unfamiliar adult in 4 months. But here she was, cross-legged on the floral settee, listening to Harold explain something with her full focused attention. Nathan stood in the doorway and didn't interrupt. "And the whole creek flooded, see? Up past the Miller farm. which nobody thought possible because that creek hasn't flooded since 1978. But your father would know about the flood. He was about your age when Harold caught sight of Nathan and adjusted. When a young man I used to know lived in the house near the creek. You'd have to ask your father about that. Dad lived near a creek? Lily asked, turning to look at Nathan. Grew up near one, Nathan said, coming into the room. It's about half a mile from here. Emily and I used to… He stopped. We used to go there after school sometimes. Emily from the bakery? Yeah. Lily considered this with the unhurried assessment of a child for whom all information is equally interesting. Were you friends? Best friends, Nathan said. For a long time. Why aren't you best friends now? Harold Finch looked at Nathan with an expression of a man who has no intention of intervening in this conversation. I left, Nathan said. I went away and didn't come back. That's hard on friendships. Why didn't you come back? He sat down across from her. That's a complicated answer. I'm 7, Lily said. I'm old enough for complicated. Harold made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Nathan looked at his daughter, this small, precise, too perceptive child who had inherited his stubbornness and her mother's directness, and had already demonstrated at age 7 that she would not be deflected from a question she actually wanted answered. I was sad, he said. And when some people get sad, they run away from the places that remind them of what they lost. I was that kind of person. He paused. I'm still figuring out how to be a different kind. Lily thought about this for a moment. Then she said, Is that why we came here? So you could figure it out? Partly, he said. Okay, she said, and got up from the settee. Can we go to the creek? They went to the creek that afternoon. Nathan and Lily, and at Lily's specific request, Emily, who had raised an eyebrow when Nathan appeared in the bakery doorway at 1 o'clock with the request but had taken off her apron without too much deliberation. I close at 2 on Thursdays anyway, she said, which Nathan knew was not entirely accurate since he'd seen her there past 4 on the previous Thursday, but he didn't say so. The path to the creek ran along the backside of the Hendersons' property and through a corridor of old oaks that still had the same carved initials that half the town's population had left over the past 50 years. Nathan found the one he was looking for without trying, NS plus EC, carved badly into the bark of the widest oak, at approximately the height of 2 kids who were 12. He pointed it out to Lily, who inspected it with interest. That's your initial and Emily's initial. Yep. What does the plus sign mean? It means we were friends, Nathan said. Emily, half a step behind him, said quietly, It means your father thought he was very clever at age 12. I was expressing a sentiment, Nathan said. You expressed it in permanent form without asking me. You didn't object at the time. I was 12. I was being polite. Lily looked between them with the expression of a child watching a tennis match and enjoying it rather more than she was letting on. The creek was the same. This was the second time in 3 weeks Nathan had thought that something was exactly the same as he'd left it, and both times it had hit him the same way, not nostalgically, exactly, but with a kind of grief for what it meant that things could remain unchanged while he changed so completely. The creek ran clear over flat gray rocks, shallow enough to wade in summer, noisy enough in spring that you had to raise your voice slightly to be heard over it. Lily sat on the bank and took off her shoes and socks without asking permission and put her feet in, then immediately made a sound of pure shock at the temperature and kept her feet in anyway. Nathan and Emily sat on the fallen tree they'd always sat on, the same one, still there, slightly more rotted but basically solid. They sat in silence for a while. The creek made its creak sounds. Lily started poking around in the rocks for anything interesting. I got a call this morning, Nathan said eventually. From your office? Board member. They want me back for a deal. Are you going? No. Emily was quiet for a moment. Nathan, I'm not going, he said again. I wasn't going to tell you to go. She pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. I was going to say, don't make decisions about your company based on what's happening here. That's not… She stopped. Started again. What's happening here is very small compared to whatever that deal is. He looked at her. That's not how I'm making the decision. Are you sure? He was quiet for a moment. Honest answer, He wasn't entirely sure. Nothing with Emily had ever been entirely uncomplicated, including and especially the question of why he had left. And that was not a conversation they'd had yet. Not directly, not fully. And it sat between them like a third person on the log. "I'm sure enough," he said. Emily looked at the creek. Lily, 15 feet away, held up a flat gray rock with a stripe of white quartz through it. "Can I keep this?" "Yeah," Nathan said. "It's just a rock." "It's not just a rock," Lily said, with the particular offense of a child whose finds have been undervalued. "It has a stripe." Emily looked at the rock seriously. "It does have a very good stripe." Lily, vindicated, put it in her jacket pocket. The conversation they needed to have happened on a Tuesday, a week later, in the empty bakery after closing. Nathan had stayed to help with cleanup, something he'd started doing without being asked, and that Emily had stopped objecting to around day 4. And they were washing the last of the equipment when Emily turned off the faucet, dried her hands, and said without preamble, "Why did you leave?" He'd been waiting for this. He'd also been dreading it. "Emily, I know it's old ground. I know it's—" She set the dish towel down. "I need to actually know, Nathan. Not the version you've told yourself. The real one." He leaned against the counter. The kitchen was quiet and smelled like bread and cleaning solution. He looked at the ceiling for a moment, then at her. "My dad," he said, "after my mom died. You know what he was like." "I know what he was like to the town," she said carefully. "I didn't know what he was like at home." "He drank," Nathan said. "For about a year after she died, he drank and I managed it and I didn't tell anyone. And then the scholarship came through for the business program in Boston and—" He stopped. This was the part he'd never said out loud. "And I thought, if I leave, he'll have to figure it out. Because there's nobody else." "Did he?" "Mostly. He had good stretches. Some bad ones. He died when I was 26. He looked at his hands. I wasn't here for that either." Emily was quiet. "But that's not the whole answer," Nathan said. "Because the truth is I was also running from—" He stopped again. Tried a different approach. Being here meant being the kid whose mother died and whose father was falling apart. Boston meant being someone who was going to make something. I could just be— He exhaled. "I could be the version of myself that hadn't lost anything yet. In Boston." "Except you had," Emily said. It wasn't accusatory. It was just true. "I know." He looked at her. "I know I had." She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't fully categorize. Not anger, not forgiveness. Something more complicated than either. Something like the face of a person who has been carrying a question for a very long time and has just received an answer that is unsatisfying in all the ways they expected and also in ways they didn't. "You left without saying goodbye," she said. "I know." "We'd been best friends for 10 years, Nathan. I woke up one morning and your house was empty." "I know," he said again. It was not enough. He knew it wasn't enough. He also didn't have anything better. "I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know how to be—" He looked away. "I was 18 and stupid and terrified, and leaving felt like the only way to stay alive. And I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm not asking you to defend it," she said. "I already know it wasn't malicious. I figured that out years ago." She picked up the dish towel again just to have something to do with her hands. "I just needed to hear the actual thing, not the polished version." "The polished version is worse," Nathan said. "In the polished version, I had reasons." "You did have reasons." "Reasons aren't the same as being right." She looked at him for a long moment. "No," she agreed. "They're not." The quiet in the kitchen felt different now, lighter somehow, like something that had been sealed had been opened and allowed to breathe. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said, "not just for leaving the way I did. You deserved—" He shook his head. "You deserved better from me." She didn't say it's okay. He was grateful for that. She said, "Don't do it again," and picked up the mop and went back to work. The mop hit the floor with a wet slap, and Emily worked it across the tiles in long, even strokes, and Nathan stood in the middle of the kitchen, not sure whether to offer to help or whether that would make things worse. He picked up the second mop from the corner and started on the other half of the floor without asking. She didn't tell him to stop. They cleaned in silence for 10 minutes, and the silence was the kind that comes after something true has been said. Not empty, not comfortable exactly, but breathable. Like a room after a window's been opened. Nathan kept his eyes on the floor and thought about what she'd said. Don't do it again, not I forgive you, not it's fine. Just that. A condition more than a pardon. He understood the difference and was, in some way he couldn't articulate, grateful for it. When the floor was done, Emily wrung out the mop and leaned it against the wall and looked at him with the direct assessment that he'd come to recognize as her baseline. Not unkind, just honest, the way a doctor looks at an X-ray. You staying for another week? She asked. I told Marcus 3 weeks, he said. Still have 9 days. She nodded slowly, like she was cataloging this information. Lily doing okay at the inn? Harold doesn't talk her ear off too much? She likes Harold, Nathan said. He told her about the 1978 flood for 45 minutes, and she asked follow-up questions. Something shifted in Emily's expression. Almost a smile. She's a good kid, Nathan. I know. He hesitated. She talked more today than she has in months. In the kitchen, with you. And at the creek. He looked at his hands. I don't know what you're doing, but whatever it is, thank you. Emily shook her head, the way people do when they don't know how to take being thanked. I'm not doing anything. I'm just treating her like a person. That's rarer than it sounds, he said. She looked at him for a moment longer, then turned and started untying her apron. Go back to your kid, Nathan. It's almost 8. He went. The walk back to the inn took 6 minutes, and he spent most of it looking at the sky, which was that specific deep blue of early summer evenings. Not fully dark, not light, the color of something between. He thought about the conversation in the kitchen, about leaving, about being 18 and thinking that if he drove fast enough in the other direction, the grief wouldn't catch him. It had caught him anyway, of course, just further from home. By the time he pushed open the inn's front door, he'd made a decision he hadn't realized he was making until it was already made. He was going to stay longer than 3 weeks. He didn't have a number in mind. He just knew 3 weeks wasn't it. He'd figure out the board later. Marcus was in the lobby, laptop open, doing something that involved a spreadsheet and 3 different browser tabs. He looked up when Nathan came in. Lily's asleep, he said. Went down around 7. She ate most of her dinner. Most? Push the carrots to the side. That's actually an improvement, Nathan said. He stopped beside the front desk. Marcus. Sir. I'm extending the stay. Indefinitely. Well, not indefinitely, but past the 3 weeks. I'll need you to handle the rescheduling on the Chicago meeting and push the Meridian briefing to Davies. Marcus absorbed this with no visible reaction. He'd worked for Nathan long enough to know that visible reactions were not part of the job description. Should I stay on as well, or? Yeah, you can work remotely. Do what you need to do. I just need you available for Lily when I'm not. Understood, Marcus said. Then after a pause that was slightly longer than his usual pauses, It's a nice town. Nathan looked at him. Cedar Creek, Marcus said, with the carefully neutral expression of someone who is absolutely not commenting on anything personal. Nice town. Go to bed, Marcus. Good night, sir. Nathan went upstairs, checked on Lily, asleep on her stomach, one arm hanging off the bed, shoes left in the middle of the floor, the way she always did despite being told not to, and sat in the chair beside the window for a while, not thinking about anything specific, just letting the town be quiet around him. The carrots, he thought again. She'd eaten everything except the carrots. A month ago, she'd eaten nothing. He put his head back against the chair and for the first time in a long time, fell asleep before midnight. The next morning, Lily was up before him again. This was becoming a pattern, and it was the most encouraging pattern Nathan had experienced in 4 months. Grief in children, the grief counselor in Manhattan had explained this carefully, often shows up as withdrawal, as a flattening of appetite and energy and curiosity. The opposite of grief, the counselor had said, is not happiness. It's engagement. It's wanting to know what comes next. Lily wanted to know what came next. Specifically, she wanted to know whether Emily had started the croissants yet. It's 6:15, Nathan told her. She starts at 5:30, Lily said, with the authority of someone who had been paying close attention. The croissants need 3 hours. How do you know that? She told me. Lily was already tying her shoes. She said laminated dough takes time and there are no shortcuts or the layers fall apart. Nathan stared at his daughter, who was 7 years old and now had opinions about laminated dough, and felt something complicated move through his chest. Something adjacent to joy, but also adjacent to grief, the way the best feelings often are when you've been through the worst ones. "Let me get my jacket," he said. Emily was indeed on her third round of croissant folds when they arrived. She handed Lily an apron and a simple task. She always had a simple task ready, Nathan had noticed, something that was actually useful and not just performed usefulness, and gave Nathan a look that said she wasn't surprised, but was reserving the right to be. "You two are becoming regulars," she said. "Is that a problem?" Nathan asked. "It's a liability," she said, but there was no edge in it. She went back to her dough. "If people see the town's most famous resident at my bakery every morning, they're going to start coming in to see you, not the croissants." "Would that be bad for business?" "I don't want celebrity traffic," she said flatly. "I want people who want the croissants." "What if they want both?" "Then they're going to be disappointed when you leave." It was said lightly, practically, but it landed differently than she probably intended, and the kitchen went briefly quiet except for Lily carefully arranging the berries she'd been given to sort and the distant sound of a car on Main Street. "Emily," Nathan said. "I didn't mean it like that," she said, not looking up. "Like what?" "Like a thing." She worked the dough. "I just meant practically. You're not going to be here forever. I have to build on customers who are." "Right," he said, but they both knew that the word leave had moved through the kitchen like something physical. That afternoon, Nathan drove out to the edge of town to look at a property that Harold Finch had mentioned, an old building that used to be a hardware store, sitting empty on the corner of Route 9 and Cedar Lane, which Harold said the owner had been trying to unload for 2 years without success. Nathan didn't have any particular plan. He just drove out and looked at it. It was a decent size. Brick, solid bones, the kind of building that was built in a period when people built things to last. The front windows were boarded, the parking lot was weeds coming up through cracked asphalt, but the structure itself looked sound, and the location caught foot traffic from the main road. He stood in the parking lot for a while looking at it. Then he took out his phone and called his acquisition director. "I need you to run a quiet valuation on a property," he said. "Small town commercial, probably undervalued. I'll send you the address." He paused. "And keep it quiet. Don't attach my name to it yet." "Understood," said his acquisition director. "Timeline?" 2 weeks. He hung up and stood in the parking lot a little longer, not entirely sure what he was doing or whether it was a good idea, and then drove back to town. He didn't mention it to Emily. The weeks found their rhythm the way time does in small places, not by the hour, not by the calendar, but by the texture of repeated days. Nathan woke early, checked on Lily, walked to the bakery. He learned to make scones that were within acceptable deviation. He learned Emily's system. She had a precise system, a place for everything, a sequence for everything, and she explained things once and expected you to remember, which Nathan found reasonable and slightly humbling, because he'd spent years surrounded by people who explained things 3 times to make sure he'd understood. Emily explained things once and handed you the next task. Lily came most mornings. She had a designated stool at the far end of the prep counter, and she had responsibilities. The berry sorting, which she took seriously, the labeling of the pastry boxes, for which Emily had given her a set of rubber stamps, and which Lily executed with the focus of a surgeon. She talked more every day. Not constantly, not the bright torrent of before January, but steadily, in the measured way of someone who was choosing her words carefully rather than not having any. She talked to Emily most. This was something Nathan watched without comment, because he understood that it was doing something that needed to be done, and that his role in it was largely to stay out of the way. Emily talked to Lily the way she talked to everyone, directly, without condescension, without the particular gentleness that adults sometimes put on with grieving children like a costume. She told Lily true things about baking and the town and her own life, and she asked Lily real questions and waited for real answers, and Lily, who was perceptive in the way of children who have learned to read rooms, understood that the questions were genuine, and responded accordingly. One morning, toward the end of Nathan's 4th week in Cedar Creek, he'd stopped counting in terms of his original 3-week plan. Lily said, while carefully stamping a pastry box, "My mom used to bake. Not like this, just from boxes. But she liked doing it." The kitchen was quiet. Nathan, at the sink, kept his eyes on the dish he was washing. Emily continued what she was doing for a moment before responding. "What did she make?" "Brownies, mostly, from the box with the picture of the pan on it." Lily examined her stamp work critically and adjusted the alignment. "She always let me pour in the chocolate chips, even though you were supposed to put them in the batter. She said more was better." "She sounds like she was right," Emily said. "She was usually right," Lily said, with the simple certainty of a child reporting a fact. "About most things. Not about carrots. She thought carrots were important, but they're not." "Carrots are important," Emily said. "Name one thing carrots are important for." "Eyesight." "I have perfect eyesight," Lily said. "You're welcome," Emily said. "The carrots have been doing their job." Lily looked at her sideways with an expression of deep skepticism and went back to her stamps. Nathan kept washing the dish that was already clean. His throat felt tight in the particular way of a man who is not going to cry in a bakery, but is having a conversation with that possibility. Lily talked about her mother sometimes. "Not often. The way you talk about something that still hurts when you press it, carefully, in small doses." But she was talking. She was finding words for the shape of the absence, and that was the thing the grief counselor back in Manhattan had said might take months or might never fully happen. And it was happening here, in this small kitchen, over pastry boxes and carrot arguments and laminated dough. Nathan didn't know how to thank Emily for that. He wasn't sure thanks was the right word for it anyway. What he did was start showing up in other ways. He fixed the shelf in the back storage room that had been leaning at a 10-degree angle for what looked like years, based on the groove it had worn in the wall. Emily came in, saw it, said nothing, and then later handed him a list of other things that needed fixing and a hardware store address with notably zero ceremony. He fixed those too, over the course of a week. He was not handy. He'd spent 14 years in offices and boardrooms, not doing anything with his hands except signing things. But he had access to YouTube tutorials and stubbornness, which turned out to cover a reasonable amount of ground. He also started talking to people in town. Not in the way he talked to business contacts, not with intent, not with an objective, but in the way Harold Finch talked, the way the diner owner Ray talked, the way people talked when they'd known each other for years, and the conversation was its own point. He relearned people he'd gone to school with. He learned about who'd stayed and who'd left and who'd come back and what Cedar Creek had lost and gained in the years he'd been gone. It had lost more than gained, honestly. 2 factories on the edge of town had closed in the past decade. The high school had lost a third of its enrollment. Several businesses on Main Street had shut down and not been replaced. The town was still standing, still alive, but it had the feel of a place running on momentum rather than growth. A place that was surviving rather than thriving. Nathan sat with this information quietly, separately from any decisions, and let it settle. One Thursday afternoon, he and Emily closed the bakery together and walked along the creek path without any particular plan. Lily was with Marcus at the inn. They'd found a board game she liked, and Marcus had revealed an unexpected willingness to play it for multiple consecutive hours, which Lily considered a significant point in his favor. The creek was louder than usual, the way it got after rain. They walked without talking for a while, the path wide enough to walk side by side, the oaks overhead thick enough that the light came through in pieces. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan said. "You're going to whether I say yes or not," Emily said. "How bad is it?" He looked at her. "The bakery. Financially." She didn't answer immediately. He watched her decide whether to be honest or whether to deflect with the particular practiced deflection of someone who has spent years answering this question by not answering it. "It's not good," she said finally. "It's not—" She stopped, recalibrated. "I'm not going to lose it tomorrow, but I've been operating on margins thin enough that one bad month changes everything. The refrigeration unit needs replacing. I've been managing it with repairs, but it's going to go eventually, and when it does—" She shook her head. "I keep thinking I'll have saved enough by then. I keep thinking that every year. How long have you been running it alone? 5 years? After my dad's knee surgeries, he couldn't manage the hours anymore. My sister left for Portland 7 years ago and she's not coming back, so... She shrugged, the shrug of someone who has made their peace with a situation without exactly being happy about it. It's mine. I'm okay with that. She looked at the creek. I'm tired in a way that doesn't go away with sleep, like it's gone into the bones. He knew. He'd felt a version of it himself, different in cause but recognizable in character. The specific exhaustion of carrying something alone for too long. Emily, he started. Don't, she said. You don't know what I was going to say. You were going to offer to help, financially. He was quiet. And I appreciate it, she said carefully, but I need you to understand why I can't take that. Tell me. She stopped walking. He stopped beside her. The creek moved past below, indifferent. Because this is my thing, she said, and her voice had the particular steadiness of something that has been thought through many times. I stayed here, and I built this, and it's hard, and it's mine, and if you... She pressed her lips together. If you come in with your money and fix it, then what did I spend 5 years doing? What does it mean? I'm not being proud for the sake of it. I just need to know the thing I built was actually built by me. Nathan looked at her. He understood it. He did. He understood it in the way of someone who had also built something from nothing, even if the scale was incomparably different. The particular ownership of a thing made by your own effort. The way money from outside, even well-meant, could hollow that out. Okay, he said. She looked at him like she was waiting for the caveat. Okay, he said again. I hear you. She held his gaze for a moment longer, checking for sincerity. Whatever she saw, she nodded once, and they started walking again. I did already talk to someone about that building on Route 9, he said, after a pause. Emily glanced at him sideways. Not for the bakery, he said quickly. Not related to you. I noticed it. The hardware store building. I was thinking about what it could be. For what? I'm not sure yet. He'd been thinking about it for 2 weeks now, turning it over, not in the aggressive way of a business deal, but in the quieter way of something that hadn't finished revealing itself. Something the town needs, not something the town already has. Cedar Creek needs a lot of things it doesn't have, Emily said. A second doctor would be useful. So would a reliable internet provider that isn't $60 a month for speeds that cap out at what we had in 2009. I can't fix the internet, Nathan said. Can't or won't? The local ISP situation is, he caught her expression. That's a joke. Half a joke, she said. They came around the bend where the creek widened into the shallow pool he and Emily used to wade in during summers. The flat rocks they'd stood on were still there, greener now, with moss, worn smoother. Lily would like it here, he thought. He should bring her. What made you stay? He asked. Not accusatorially, genuinely. He'd been wondering it since he came back, turning it around, trying to understand the shape of the choice. After everything. After your dad's health, after your sister left, after... He stopped. You could have gone. You had the grades. You had the talent. You had 1,000 reasons to leave. Emily was quiet for a while, long enough that he thought she might not answer. My mom, she said finally. When she got sick, different sick, this was before the bakery issue, this was her heart, she sat me down and she said, Emily, I need you to know that if you leave, I will be okay. I need you to know that you don't have to stay because of me. And I remember thinking that it was the kindest thing she'd ever said to me. And also, she paused, also that if she was saying it, she needed me to stay. Did she ask you to? No, she never asked. That's what I mean. She was too careful to ask. Emily crouched down and picked up a flat rock, turned it in her fingers, set it back down. But she was alone, and my dad's health was already going, and the bakery was her thing, the thing that connected her to her own mother who'd built it. So I stayed. She stood up. And then it became my thing too, and then she died and it was just mine, and she looked at the creek. I don't regret it, I want to be clear about that. I'm not telling you this as a sad story. I made the choice I made, and I'd probably make it again. But? He asked. She looked at him. But sometimes I wonder what I would have been if I'd had the option of choosing it freely, instead of it being the only thing that made sense to choose. Nathan didn't say anything. There wasn't anything adequate to say. He just stood there with her and let the creek run past and thought about choices and the context that shape them and the way two people can make completely opposite decisions and still both be trying to hold something together. It was Emily who broke the silence, and she did it by bending down, picking up a flat stone and skipping it across the pool. 3 skips, then a plunk. "Still better than you," she said. "We haven't competed yet," Nathan said, picking up a stone. "We competed constantly from ages 9 to 17. You never beat me. I almost beat you when we were 14. You got 2 skips, and it's been 20 years, and you still remember it." She gave him the sideways look. "What does that tell you? That 2 skips is better than none?" She laughed. It was sudden and unguarded, and it hit Nathan somewhere around the sternum because he'd heard her laugh in the past 4 weeks. The small professional laughs, the dry sounds of amusement she made at his expense. But not like this. Not the real one, unedited. It had a crack in it, a little roughness, like something that didn't get used enough. He skipped his stone. 1 skip. Then it sank. "Improving," Emily said generously. "That was worse than 2 skips. It's an entirely different creek." She picked up another stone. "It changes things." He watched her line up the throw, the particular stance she'd always had, hip cocked, wrist loose, and thought that 14 years was both an enormous amount of time and also, standing here, barely any time at all. Over the following days, Nathan began doing a thing he hadn't done in years, asking for nothing. He had built a career, an entire ecosystem of ambition and achievement, on the premise of always knowing what he needed and moving toward it. Every conversation had been a variable, every relationship a potential asset or liability. He'd thought of this as pragmatism and not as something worth examining. But Cedar Creek had no use for Nathan Sterling, the CEO. It had a version of Nathan Sterling it had filed under Gail and Thomas's boy, the one who left, and it regarded the billionaire status with the particular polite disinterest of a community that had its own long memory and wasn't especially impressed by things that happened elsewhere. Ray at the diner, who had known Nathan since he was 9 years old, handed him his coffee every morning with the usual, as though Nathan had been coming in every day for decades, rather than 4 weeks. Mrs. Patterson, who apparently did make excellent croissants and who appeared at the bakery on alternating Thursdays to help Emily, patted Nathan's arm and told him he looked thin and that he should eat more. The hardware store owner, a taciturn man named Gerald, who had replaced Nathan's father's friend Ben in the years Nathan had been gone, corrected his screw selection without judgment and recommended a better anchor for the bakery shelf repair. He was just Nathan, not Nathan Sterling, not the billionaire, not the success story or the cautionary tale or whatever Cedar Creek wanted to make of him. Just Nathan, who bought the wrong screws and was learning to make scones. He didn't realize how much he'd needed that until it was happening. Lily was thriving. This was the right word for it, he decided, even though it made his throat tighten whenever he let himself acknowledge it. She had color back. She was sleeping through the night, which hadn't happened reliably since January. She'd started narrating things again, the steady stream of observations and questions that had gone quiet after her mother died, and that was now returning, tentatively, the way birds come back after a storm, one at a time. She'd also developed an independent relationship with Emily that Nathan was not entirely a part of, and which he observed from a respectful distance, understanding that it was its own thing and not an extension of whatever was happening between him and Emily. Lily asked Emily questions about the town, about baking, about her own childhood, the curious, specific questions of a child who is genuinely interested in adults as people rather than just as providers of things. Emily answered them the way she answered everything, honestly, without varnish, treating Lily's questions with the seriousness they deserved. One evening, Nathan overheard them through the pass-through window between the kitchen and the front room. "Did you always know you wanted to be a baker?" Lily asked. "No," Emily said. "For a while I wanted to be a marine biologist." "Like studying fish?" like studying the ocean. Everything in it. I thought the ocean was the most interesting place in the world. Did you ever go? I went to the coast once, when I was 20, stood at the edge and thought, well, there it is. A pause, the sound of something being shifted on a tray. And then I came home. Was that sad? Another pause, this one longer. A little, Emily said. For a while. And then the bakery became mine, and I understood that I was an ocean person who lives inland. I take care of the thing in front of me very well, and I think about the ocean sometimes, and that's okay. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I used to want to be a veterinarian, but now I think I might want to own a bakery. Nathan, in the front room, pressed his back against the wall and stared at the ceiling and breathed very carefully. Those aren't mutually exclusive, Emily said from the kitchen. What does mutually exclusive mean? It means one doesn't cancel the other out. You can be both. A veterinarian baker, Lily said, trying out the phrase. A baker who heals animals on the side, Emily said. Sounds efficient. Nathan heard Lily laugh, the real laugh, the bell sound, the too bright sudden thing. He hadn't heard it in 4 months and 3 weeks, and it came through the pass-through window of a small bakery in a town he'd spent 14 years running from, and it was the best sound he'd heard in years. He pressed his hand flat against the wall and stood there until he was sure he had his face under control. Then he went in and helped finish the cleanup, and he didn't say anything about what he'd heard, and Emily, who had been facing the other direction when he came in, didn't ask. On the last day of what would have been his original 3 weeks, a Sunday, the bakery closed, Nathan drove out to the Route 9 property again. He'd gotten the valuation back. The numbers were what he'd expected, undervalued significantly, the owner motivated to sell, the building structurally sound beneath its years of neglect. He sat in the parking lot and looked at the building and thought about what Emily had said about the things Cedar Creek needed. And then he thought about a conversation he'd had with Gerald at the hardware store about the old apprenticeship program at the closed factory, and then another conversation with the high school principal, a young woman named Dr. Reyes, who'd been doing the job for 2 years and had a waiting list of kids who needed after-school programming that didn't exist yet. He made a call, not to his acquisition director, to his estate lawyer, a different person, and then to his foundation director who handled the charitable arm of his wealth that had been largely theoretical for the past 2 years because Nathan hadn't had a direction to point it. I need to talk about a project, he said, something local, community-based. I'll send you the details this week. What's the budget framework? His foundation director asked. Let's start with what it needs, Nathan said, and work backwards from there. He hung up and looked at the building one more time. In his head, it was already something. He could see the shape of it, the way you can see a thing clearly before you've done anything to make it real. It needed work and money and time and people who believed in it. He had 2 of those things in abundance. The third was coming back. And the fourth, he thought about Emily saying, I need to know the thing I built was actually built by me. He'd be careful. He'd be thoughtful. He wouldn't do this the way he did business, pushing through and assuming results. He'd do it the way Emily made croissants, slowly, with attention, understanding that some things fell apart if you rushed them. He drove back to town. Lily was on the front steps of the inn when he pulled up, sitting beside Harold, who appeared to be explaining something involving hand gestures that suggested either a very large fish or the 1978 flood again. Lily saw the car and stood up, and for the first time in months, the expression on her face when she saw him coming was not the careful neutral of a child managing her own sadness. It was just glad. Simply glad. Harold said there's a town fair in 3 weeks, she said when he reached her, with a pie contest. There is, Harold confirmed from the steps. Emily should enter, Lily said with the certainty of someone announcing an obvious truth. She probably already knows about it, Nathan said. We should ask her, Lily said. We should go tomorrow and ask her. Okay, he said. Tomorrow. Lily nodded, satisfied, and went back to her conversation with Harold. Nathan sat on the step beside her and looked at the town in the late afternoon light. The storefronts, the water tower, the steeple, the sky going gold at the edges, and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time and almost didn't recognize. Still, just briefly, just in this moment, still. He didn't try to name it or hold on to it. He just let it be there, beside his daughter, on the steps of a small inn in the town he grew up in, while Harold Finch explained the flood of 1978 for what was probably not the last time. Emily did know about the pie contest. She knew about it the way she knew about everything in Cedar Creek. Not because she paid close attention, but because Cedar Creek was small enough that information arrived whether you wanted it or not. The town fair had run every June for 30-something years. The pie contest had run inside it for most of those, and Emily had entered exactly once, at age 19, with her mother's cherry pie recipe, and had come in second to Donna Kessler's blueberry, which Emily maintained to this day had won on reputation rather than merit. Donna Kessler cheated, Emily said, not looking up from the pastry she was crimping. How do you cheat in a pie contest? Lily asked. She was on her stool, stamps arranged in front of her, watching Emily's hands with the focus she brought to anything involving technique. She brought samples to the judges the week before, pre-lobbied. Is that allowed? It's not allowed, Emily said. Which is the problem. Lily considered this. Is she entering this year? Donna Kessler has entered every year since 1987. She has a shelf of ribbons in her front hall. My neighbor Ellen told me. She was at Donna's house for book club and reported back. So you should enter, Lily said, and beat her. Emily looked up from the pastry and over at Nathan, who was leaning against the far counter with his coffee and his careful expression, the one he wore when he was watching something and not wanting to influence it. He raised both hands in a gesture of complete non-involvement. It's not that simple, Emily said. Why not? Lily asked. Because entering means wanting to win, and wanting to win means caring, and caring means… Emily stopped. She put the crimped pastry aside and picked up another. It means something when you lose. It also means something when you win, Lily said, with the infuriating logical clarity of a 7-year-old who hasn't yet learned the defensive architecture of not wanting things too much. Emily looked at her for a moment, then at Nathan. She's your kid, Emily said. She makes good points, Nathan said. She makes relentless points. Also inherited, Nathan said, and Emily made a sound that was half resignation and half something warmer than that, and went back to her pastry, and Lily picked up her stamps with the satisfied expression of someone who had won an argument without technically having it. 3 days later, Emily entered the pie contest. She told no one she'd done it. Nathan found out from Harold, who found out from the registration table, which was run by his wife's cousin, and who texted the group chat about it before Nathan could say anything. Nathan did not mention this to Emily. The fair was set for the second Saturday in June, which was 11 days away. The town began its preparations in the low-key way of small towns that have done the same thing many times. Banners going up on Main Street, the park at the center of town getting mowed twice in 1 week, Ray at the diner putting a hand-lettered sign in his window advertising a Fair Week special. Nathan watched it all with the detached interest of someone watching a culture he'd been part of and had forgotten. Lily was obsessed with the fair. She asked Harold daily for details, the games, the food vendors, the rides, the layout, and Harold, delighted to have an audience, provided them in elaborate and occasionally contradictory detail. Nathan let it happen. He liked watching Lily want something. It was new again, or newly returned, the forward lean of anticipation. In the meantime, the building on Route 9 moved from idea to paperwork. Nathan worked quietly on it, calls with his lawyer, calls with his foundation director, a long conversation with Dr. Reyes at the high school that ran 90 minutes and ended with her saying, in a slightly stunned voice, "You're serious about this?" And Nathan saying yes. He kept it away from Emily, partly because it wasn't finished enough to share, and partly because he wanted to be sure he was doing it the right way. The way that wasn't about impressing her or proving something, but about the thing itself being worth doing. He had one conversation with Gerald about it, standing in the hardware store aisle, while Gerald helped him find the right grade of sandpaper for the bakery's refinished prep counter. A project he'd taken on without being asked, and which Emily had observed with only the mildest skepticism. "You know about the old apprenticeship program?" Nathan asked. "The one that ran through the Kessler factory." Gerald considered this. He was a man of few words and good judgments, which Nathan had come to appreciate. "Ran till about 2018, he said. 40, 50 kids a year. Machine shop, electrical, carpentry. Good program. Factory closure killed it. What happened to the instructors? Most retired. One moved to Millhaven. One still in town. Vic Caruso lives out on the old Marsh Road. He's 62, still sharp. Gerald found the sandpaper Nathan needed and handed it over. Why? I'm looking at the Route 9 building, Nathan said, thinking about what it could be. Gerald looked at him without any particular expression. He was the kind of man who had developed good instincts about when to ask more and when to let a thing develop at its own pace. Talk to Vic, he said, and went back to his inventory. Nathan talked to Vic the following Tuesday. Vic Caruso was a compact, direct man who had spent 30 years teaching 16-year-olds to use tools correctly and had the particular patience of someone who had explained the same things many times and still meant them. He sat across from Nathan in his kitchen with a cup of coffee and listened to the whole proposal without interrupting. And when Nathan finished, Vic was quiet for a full minute. Then he said, "You want to rebuild the program. Something like it, updated, broader. Not just traditional trades, maybe include culinary, technology, design, something that gives kids options that Cedar Creek currently can't offer them without leaving. You think kids will stay if they have options?" "Some will," Nathan said. "Not all. But right now they leave because there's nothing here for them. That's different from leaving because they want to." Vic turned his coffee cup in his hands. "I've got 3 former instructors I could probably bring back. Martinez and Schultz would jump at it. Pruitt's maybe. Could you run it?" Vic looked at him steadily. "If it's real." "It's real," Nathan said. Another pause. Shorter this time. "Then yes," Vic said. "I could run it." They shook hands across the kitchen table, and Nathan drove back to town with the particular feeling of something clicking into its correct position. Not triumphant, not clean, but right. He still didn't tell Emily. 4 days before the fair, the phone call came. Nathan was in the bakery's back storage room, finishing a repair on the refrigeration unit's secondary seal, a temporary fix that Emily had been putting off and that Nathan had quietly researched and quietly acquired the parts for, and which he was now quietly installing on a Tuesday afternoon when the bakery was between the morning rush and the afternoon prep. He heard his phone buzz on the shelf beside him, saw Richard Holt's name, and let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again 30 seconds later. He let that one go too. On the third call he answered, because 3 calls in 3 minutes from Richard Holt meant something had moved from manageable to urgent. "Nathan," Richard's voice had a particular quality, controlled tension, like a cable pulled tight. Apex Group moved the deadline. They want a decision by end of month, not end of quarter, end of June. Nathan set down the seal he'd been holding. "That's 2 weeks. "Yes." "I said Davies. Davies flew to Chicago last week. Nathan, I need you to understand something." Richard's voice shifted again, this time into the register of a man who has stopped being diplomatic. "Apex isn't just pulling out of Meridian if we miss this. They're signaling to the market. If Sterling Holdings passes on this deal under these circumstances, other partners are going to start asking questions about leadership stability." "Leadership is stable," Nathan said. "You've been gone 6 weeks, Nathan. I've been in contact You've been returning emails. You haven't been in a room." Richard paused. "The board meets in 12 days. There are people on that board who have been very patient, who believe in what you've built. But patience has a shelf life, and right now—" "What are you saying, Richard?" A pause. "I'm saying that the conversation about your continued role is closer to the table than you might like it to be. And that being in the room for the Meridian close would put that conversation away." The storage room was quiet. Nathan could hear Emily moving in the kitchen on the other side of the wall, could hear the low sound of the mixer, could smell the bread that was in the oven. He looked at the refrigeration unit seal in his hand, a small rubber component, $40, that had been causing Emily's backup cooling system to work twice as hard for probably a year. "I'll call you back," he said. "Nathan—" "Tonight," he said. "I'll call you tonight." He hung up. He sat on the floor of the storage room for a while. Not thinking, exactly. More like waiting for his thoughts to organize themselves into something he could work with. The board meeting in 12 days. The Meridian deadline. $300 million and everything Richard Holt had delicately implied about what happened to a company when its leader was absent. He'd built Sterling Holdings from 22 years old with $200,000 of borrowed money and an idea that 4 different investors had told him was too early for the market. He'd worked 14-hour days for 5 years and then 18-hour days for 3 more and had made the company what it was through sheer refusal to accept that it couldn't be done. It was his. Every division, every contract, every employee, his. He sat with that for a minute, and then he sat with a different thing. He thought about Lily laughing through the pass-through window. He thought about Emily at the creek skipping stones. He thought about the Route 9 building and Vic Caruso's If It's Real. He thought about what it had cost him to build $300 million. And he thought about what those $300 million had bought him, and he made a list in his head of each. Not metaphorically, actually listed them, the way he'd always solved problems, by putting the variables in order. The list on the cost side was long. The list on the bought side was shorter than he expected. He finished installing the seal, washed his hands at the storage room sink, and went into the kitchen. Emily was at the main station working on what appeared to be a test run of the pie contest entry. A deep dish cherry, from what he could see, the filling a dark red in the partially assembled shell. She was focused in the way she got when she was executing something that required precision, her movements deliberate and economical. "Refrigeration seals replaced," Nathan said. "Thank you," she said without looking up. "The unit should run more efficiently now, probably extending the life by another year and a half." "I know," she said. "I looked up the part after you left to get it. I wasn't going to say anything but thank you, Nathan. Really." He stood in the kitchen doorway and watched her work for a moment. "I got a call from my board," he said. Her hands slowed slightly, then resumed. "They want me back," he said. "There's a deal closing at the end of the month. $300 million. Board meeting in 12 days. Emily was quiet. She continued working, and the quiet had a quality of a person who is giving you room to keep talking without pushing you in any direction. He'd come to know that quiet, the particular way she made space for people to say the whole thing, rather than just the surface of it. "If I'm not there," he said, "the conversation about my role apparently gets complicated." "Meaning they'd push you out?" "Meaning they'd try. I don't know if they'd succeed." He crossed his arms. "The company is mine, built it myself, but boards have leverage when they decide to use it." "What do you want to do?" Emily asked. "I want to stay," he said. It came out without hesitation, which surprised him slightly, even though it shouldn't have. He'd been circling this answer for days and was only now landing on it squarely. Emily set down the tools she'd been using and turned to look at him. She had flour on her forearm and the look of someone who is about to say something they've been thinking about carefully. "Nathan," she said, "I need you to hear this and not argue with me until I'm finished." "Okay." "You built that company. It's real and it's yours and it matters." She held his gaze. "And if you throw it away because of—" She stopped, looked away, then back. "Because of whatever is happening here. The bakery, Lily, me, the creek, the whole thing. If you burn down something real because you've been charmed by the idea of something simpler, I can't let you do that without saying so." "You think that's what's happening?" "I think you've been here 6 weeks and everything is warm and uncomplicated compared to whatever your life was before. And I think that's a real thing. I'm not saying it isn't, but I also think—" She picked up the tool again, set it back down. "I think there's a version of this where you make a dramatic choice and it feels like the right one in the moment, and then 3 years from now you're angry at a situation you walked into." "You think I don't know my own mind?" "I think you know it better when it's not in a good period," she said. "When things are hard and you know them anyway, that's when you can trust it." The kitchen was quiet for a moment, flour in the air, the cherry filling sitting in its shell, dark and serious. "Emily," he said, "I'm not choosing Cedar Creek over my company because this place is charming. I'm choosing it because—" He stopped, felt his way forward carefully. "Because I've been building things for 14 years. Companies, deals, portfolios. And I'm very good at it. And it has given me almost nothing that I actually needed." He looked at her. Being here has given me more in 6 weeks than the last 3 years of everything I had. She was watching him. Her expression was the one he'd come to read as Emily in the process of deciding whether something was true, assessing it, running it against her experience, checking for cracks. "That's real," he said. "I'm not making it up, and I'm not chasing simplicity. I know what this town is. I know it's hard and small and underfunded, and everybody's in everybody's business." He almost smiled. "I know it doesn't have decent internet. I'm choosing it knowing what it is, not because I've forgotten what it isn't." Emily was quiet for a long moment. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay?" "I said what I needed to say. You said what you needed to say." She turned back to the pie. "Now call your board back and figure out what you actually want to do. Don't make the decision in my kitchen." "I think I already made it." "Nathan, I'm not going back for the Meridian deal," he said. "I'm going to send Davies, and I'm going to restructure my involvement so the company runs without me needing to be present for every significant event. I should have done it 2 years ago. I didn't because I was using the company as an excuse not to think about other things." Emily said nothing for a moment. "Just worked." "And the board?" she asked. "They can have the conversation they need to have, Birsi," he said. "I'll be on the phone for the meeting, but I'm not going back to Chicago to prove I'm still standing." She kept working. He watched her hands on the pastry. He had the sense that she was processing something more than she was showing, that the careful neutrality of her expression was doing some work. "This isn't because of you," he said. "I need you to know that." She glanced at him. "I know. It's not me trying to—" "Nathan," she set down the tool. "I know. I can tell the difference between a man making a decision and a man performing a decision for an audience." She looked at him steadily. "You were making one. I know what that looks like." He exhaled. Some of the tension he'd been carrying since the phone call went with it. "I'm going to call Richard back tonight," he said. "Good," Emily said. "And while you do that, I'm going to finish this pie so I can beat Donna Kessler on merit." "You're going to win," Nathan said. "Obviously," Emily said, "but I need to deserve it." He left her to the pie and went back to the inn to make the call that had been coming for 6 weeks, and possibly longer. The call that was the end of one thing and the beginning of something he didn't have a name for yet. The conversation with Richard lasted 45 minutes. Richard made his arguments. He made them well, as he always did, and Nathan listened to all of them with the particular attention of a man who respects an opponent. He acknowledged the concerns. He laid out his counter-proposal. Davies closes Meridian with full authority. Nathan participates in the board meeting by phone, a formal restructuring of Nathan's operational role to be finalized over the following month. He was calm and direct and didn't apologize for being in Cedar Creek. He said, "The company will be fine. You know it will be fine. The deal you're actually worried about isn't Meridian." Richard was quiet for a moment. "No," he said finally. "It isn't." "I'll be at the board meeting," Nathan said. "Virtually. That's what I'm offering." Another pause. Richard Holt had been in boardrooms for 40 years, and he understood the line between pushing and pushing too far. "All right," he said, "but Nathan, this restructuring conversation needs to happen properly, not by email." "It will. Schedule it for the week after the board meeting. I'll come to Chicago for that one." "In person," Richard confirmed. "In person," Nathan said. He hung up and sat on the edge of the hotel bed and felt the specific weight of a significant thing that had been done. Not relief exactly, more like the sensation of a load being redistributed. The same total weight, but arranged differently, more evenly. He thought about calling Emily to tell her how it went. Then he didn't because it was 10:30 at night and she started work at 5:30 and the update could wait until morning. He thought about what she'd said. "I can tell the difference between a man making a decision and a man performing a decision for an audience." He wondered when he'd last had someone in his life who said things like that to him. Someone who was not paid to say true things, not professionally obligated to say useful things, just someone who said the true thing because it was true. He'd had advisors and lawyers and therapists and a board of directors. He'd had colleagues who respected him, and employees who liked him, and acquaintances who found him interesting. He couldn't, off the top of his head, think of someone who would tell him when he was wrong and wait to see whether he knew it. Except Emily. who had been doing it since they were 8 years old and appeared to have no intention of stopping. He lay back on the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling and thought that this might be the most valuable thing a person could have. Not $300 million, not a board seat, not a private jet, but someone in your life who told you true things without wanting anything back from them. Then he fell asleep. The fair came on a Saturday of clouds and sun in alternating bands, the way June weather in the region often ran. Warm when the sun was out, unexpectedly cool in the shadows. By 9 in the morning, the park at the center of town was already filling up, the booths arranged in the pattern they'd apparently occupied for years, vendors setting out their goods with the familiarity of people who'd been doing this for a decade. Lily was dressed and ready by 7:15. She had the rock with the white quartz stripe in her jacket pocket, which she'd taken to carrying consistently, a practice Nathan had not commented on. She dragged Nathan through the inn's breakfast in 11 minutes and was at the door with her shoes already on while he was still drinking his coffee. "Marcus," she said without turning around. Marcus, at the small breakfast table, looked up from his laptop. "You're coming to the fair," Lily told him. Marcus looked at Nathan. "You're coming to the fair," Nathan confirmed. Marcus closed his laptop with the expression of a man for whom this was not exactly what he'd planned, and also was completely fine. "Of course," he said. The three of them walked to the park, which was already alive in the way that small-town fairs are alive. Specific, local, built on relationships and repetition. People called out to each other across the crowd. Kids moved in packs with the loose organization of children who know each other from school. There were 4 food trucks and a small midway, and the exhibition tables set up in a long white tent at the far end of the park, and in the far corner of the tent the pie contest entries were laid out in a row, judges moving along them with clipboards. Emily was not there yet when they arrived. Nathan found her pie on the table, deep dish cherry, crust crimped in the deliberate pattern she'd practiced twice, the filling visible through the lattice top work, dark and serious, and stood in front of it for a moment with a feeling that was somewhere between pride and protectiveness and something else that he didn't examine too closely. Lily pressed in beside him and studied the pie with critical attention. "The lattice is perfect," she said. "Don't tell her that," Nathan said. "Why not? She'll think you're just being nice." "I'm not just being nice," Lily said with mild offense. "I have standards." She did. She'd been in that kitchen for weeks. She probably did have standards. They moved through the fair. Marcus, freed from his professional mode by the simple fact of a Saturday and a midway, turned out to have an unexpected talent for the ring toss game, which he won with the systematic precision of someone who had approached it as an engineering problem. He carried a stuffed bear for an hour before Lily accepted it with the gravity of a diplomat receiving a gift. Nathan bought lemonade, real lemonade, from the stand run by the high school's student council, and thought briefly about the 9-year-old version of himself who had made salted lemonade and served it to 6 people before anyone said anything, and had spent 3 decades being vaguely embarrassed about it, and now found it genuinely funny. Something about Cedar Creek had done that, returned things to their actual scale, their actual weight. Childhood embarrassments back to what they were. The lemonade incident was just a story. A funny one. He found Emily at noon at the edge of the tent, watching the judges finish their rounds. She was in a light blue jacket over her usual jeans, hair down for once rather than up with the pencil, and she was watching the judges' table with the expression of someone trying very hard to look like they didn't care and not quite pulling it off. "You're nervous," Nathan said, coming to stand beside her. "I'm not nervous," she said. "Your left hand is in your jacket pocket and your right hand is holding nothing. You always hold something when you're waiting." She looked at him sideways. "You've been paying that much attention?" 6 weeks, he said. She looked back at the judge's table. After a moment, "I'm a little nervous." "You shouldn't be. The pie is—" "Don't tell me the pie is good. If it's not good enough and you told me it was good, that's worse." "I wasn't going to tell you it was good," he said. "I was going to tell you it was better than Donna Kessler's, and the judges would have to be committed to the bit not to see it." "Have you tasted Donna Kessler's pie?" "No." "Then how do you know?" "Because you made yours," he said simply, and then felt the plainness of it sitting between them. Too plain maybe, too direct. and watched Emily Carter look at the judge's table and say nothing for a long moment. "Thank you," she said finally. "I mean it." "I know you do." She was quiet. "That's why I said thank you." Across the tent, one of the judges picked up a red ribbon and moved toward the table. Nathan watched Emily watch the judges. He watched the careful set of her jaw, and the way her hand finally came out of her pocket and both hands hung at her sides, open. He thought about what she'd said on the creek path, about wondering what she would have been if she'd had the option of choosing freely. He thought about the ocean person who lives inland and takes care of the thing in front of her very well. He thought that the thing in front of Emily had been taking care of itself lately, that it might continue to. The judge set the first place red ribbon in front of a blueberry pie 3 spots down from Emily's cherry, Donna Kessler's blueberry. Nathan heard Emily exhale, just slightly, the sound of something releasing. "I'm sorry," he said. She stood there for a moment, 2, 3, then she said, very quietly, "The crust was better." "It was," Nathan said. "Anyone could see that." "The filling was better." "Yes. I've been making that filling for 20 years. My mother's recipe." "I know." She stood there a moment longer. He didn't put his arm around her or tell her it was okay or say any of the things that would have been easier to say. He just stood there beside her and let her feel what she felt without rushing her through it. Then Lily materialized at Emily's elbow, appearing the way children appear, suddenly with no audible approach, and looked at the ribbon situation and at Emily's face and said, "Second place?" "No ribbon," Emily said. "Third place gets a ribbon. I didn't get a ribbon." Lily looked at the judge's table, then at Emily. Then she reached into her jacket pocket, took out the rock with the white quartz stripe, and held it out to Emily. Emily looked at it. "It has a very good stripe," Lily said. "You should have it." Nathan watched Emily Carter, who had been holding herself together with the careful composure of a woman who did not let things land too hard in public, look at a 7-year-old holding out a striped rock and lose the battle with composure in the best possible way. She crouched down, took the rock, and pulled Lily into a hug. Not the brief polished kind, but the real kind, the held kind, the kind you get from someone who needed it as much as you did. Lily hugged her back without any hesitation. Nathan looked away. At the tent ceiling, at the midway, at the crowd. He blinked twice and looked at his shoes and thought about the refrigeration seal and the sandpaper grade and the Route 9 building and all the small practical things a person could think about when the thing they were actually feeling was too large for the available space. When he looked back, Emily was standing again, the rock in her hand, Lily beside her. Emily's eyes were bright but dry. "Thank you," Emily said to Lily. "You can give it back when you win next year," Lily said. "Deal," Emily said. They stood in the tent with the fair going on around them, the noise and the crowd and the smell of fried food and cut grass. And Nathan thought that this was what it looked like, not the idea of it, not the cleaned up version. This was what it looked like to be part of something, to be woven into the texture of a place and its people, to have a kid who gave away her best rock to someone who needed it, and to have someone who accepted it. He thought he had been building the wrong things for a very long time. Not the company. The company was real and good, and he wasn't going to pretend otherwise. But the structure around his life, the way he had arranged everything, so that the important things were always elsewhere, always next, always contingent on something being completed first. He'd been building towards something he kept moving. He was standing in the middle of it right now, and he hadn't needed to build anything to get here. Just come back. Just stay long enough. Later, the three of them walked back from the fair in the gold late afternoon light. Lily between Nathan and Emily, Marcus behind with the stuffed bear under his arm. Lily was talking about the pie contest, her analysis of where it had gone wrong, which involved a detailed critique of the judging criteria that she had apparently formulated during the awards portion. "The crust matters more than filling in a classic cherry," she said seriously. "Any expert would know that. The judges weren't experts. Or they liked blueberry better," Emily said. "Blueberry is inferior," Lily said. "That's a strong position." "Strong positions are usually right," Lily said, and looked up at Nathan with the expression of a child confirming her own thesis. "Don't look at me," Nathan said. You taught me that, Lily said. I have no memory of that. You said it to Marcus about the meridian thing. Marcus, 3 steps behind them, made a sound that was carefully not a laugh. Emily looked at Nathan. Kids, Nathan said, absorb more than you think. I know, Emily said, and there was something in the way she said it, looking at Lily, who had gone back to her pie critique, that was not a simple statement. That was a woman who had been thinking about something for a while and was still thinking about it. Something that had started maybe when a 7-year-old handed her a rock and held on. Nathan didn't say anything about that either. There were things that were still developing, things that needed the time they needed. He'd spent 14 years trying to move faster than the process, and it had cost him more than he wanted to calculate. He was done rushing things that needed to be slow. The board meeting happened on a Thursday, conducted over a video call that Nathan took from the inn's small business room. A windowless space with a printer that didn't work and a whiteboard that had apparently been written on in permanent marker at some point and imperfectly erased. He wore a jacket over the shirt he'd been wearing all morning. He did not put on a tie. Richard Holt opened the meeting with the careful neutrality of a man managing multiple agendas simultaneously, which Nathan had always respected about him, even when it was directed against him. The board members present, 7 in Chicago, 2 dialing in from other cities, listened to Davies' Meridian summary with the attentiveness of people who had money in the outcome. Davies had closed the deal. 90% of the original terms, slightly modified structure, fully executed. The number on the final contract was $280 million, not $300, and the board accepted this with the pragmatism of people for whom $280 million was an acceptable outcome. The second item on the agenda was Nathan. Not listed that way, of course, listed as leadership continuity and operational structure, which was the formal language for a conversation about what happened when the person who built the company wasn't in the building. Nathan let them make their points. Diane Chu, who was sharp and fair and had been on the board for 6 years, said that the company needed defined protocols for Nathan's absence. Not criticism, she said, just structure. Warren Gill, who had been the loudest voice for Nathan's return, said that founder-led companies had specific vulnerabilities when the founder was distracted, and used the word distracted with the precision of a man who had chosen it carefully. Nathan noted the word and did not react to it. He made his proposal cleanly, the way he'd made every presentation for 14 years. This is the situation, this is the solution, this is what it requires. A restructured operational tier. Davies elevated to COO with full day-to-day authority. Monthly board calls instead of weekly. Nathan available for strategic decisions, major acquisitions, external relationships. In residence in Cedar Creek for the next 6 to 8 months, working remotely, travel as needed. 6 to 8 months, Warren Gill repeated. At minimum, Nathan said. And after that? We'll see, Nathan said. This was not the answer Warren Gill wanted. It was, however, the honest one, and after a pause that lasted long enough to be meaningful, the board accepted the restructuring with conditions. Formal documentation within 30 days, a performance review of the new structure at 6 months, Nathan in Chicago for the Q4 strategic planning session in October. Nathan agreed to all of it. The call ended at 11:15. He sat in the windowless business room for a few minutes after the screen went dark, not doing anything in particular, just sitting with the fact of what had just happened. The company was still his. The terms had shifted. The shape of things going forward was different from the shape they'd been before, and different from anything he'd planned when he drove into Cedar Creek 8 weeks ago looking for a town that remembered him before the money. He took off the jacket, hung it on the back of the chair, and went to the bakery. Emily was between the morning rush and the afternoon prep, wiping down the display case with a cloth that had seen better days. She looked up when he came in. "How'd it go?" she asked. "Kept my company," he said. "Changed how I run it." She studied him for a moment. "You okay with that?" He thought about it honestly, the way she'd trained him to. "Yeah," he said. "I am." She nodded once, went back to the display case. "There's coffee. The good batch, not the one I make when I'm rushing." He poured himself a cup and sat at the counter and watched her work, and the morning went on around them, and it was ordinary in every way, and he thought that ordinary was a thing he'd underestimated for most of his adult life. 2 weeks later, Nathan bought the building on Route 9. The sale closed quietly, routed through a holding company that kept his name off the paperwork until the ink was dry. He'd done this partly from habit. He'd always moved quietly on acquisitions, believing that attention inflated price, and partly because he didn't want Cedar Creek's reaction to the purchase to be about Nathan Sterling, the billionaire, doing a charity project. He wanted the conversation to be about the project itself. He told Emily the day after the sale closed, on a Tuesday morning in the bakery, because she was going to hear about it from Harold within 48 hours regardless, and he preferred she hear it from him. She stopped what she was doing when he told her. "The Route 9 building," she said. "Yes." "The old hardware store." "Right." She looked at him with an expression he'd learned to read as Emily processing information at a speed faster than she was showing. "What are you going to do with it?" He laid it out. The apprenticeship program concept, the conversations with Dr. Reyes and Vic Caruso, the foundation funding structure, the plan to bring in 3 or 4 instructors and open in phases, starting with trades and culinary and expanding from there. Emily was quiet for a long moment after he finished. "Culinary," she said. "There's a space in Cedar Creek for it," he said carefully. "Qualified instruction in culinary skills, bakery, restaurant prep, food business, things that could keep people here who want to stay, or give them real credentials if they go." She turned back to her work. He watched her process it from behind, the set of her shoulders, the pace of her hands. She was thinking hard, and he had the sense that she was also feeling something about it that she wasn't ready to name yet. "I'm not doing this for you," he said, the same thing he'd said about the board decision, because it kept being true and kept needing to be said. "I mean, you're part of why I understand what Cedar Creek needs, but the program isn't about your bakery, it's its own thing." "I know," she said. "I'm not—" She paused. "It's a good idea, Nathan. It's a real good idea." "I know you know that. I just wanted you to—" "I know," she said again, softer this time. "Thank you for telling me before Harold did." "I figured I had about 36 hours. 24, she said. "He gets coffee at Alderman's on Tuesdays. Linda Henderson tells him everything." They worked through the morning in the particular companionable rhythm they'd built over 8 weeks, handing things off without needing to explain, navigating the kitchen's geography without bumping into each other, filling in the silences without anxiety. Nathan had stopped noticing the strangeness of it. A man who ran a multi-division holding company standing in a small-town bakery kitchen learning to make proper bread. Because it had stopped being strange. It was just where he was. Around midday, his father's friend came in. Nathan recognized him immediately despite the years. Joe Abrams, who had been Thomas Sterling's closest friend and who had been at the edge of Nathan's life in a way that was connected to everything painful from that period. Joe was 70 now, white-haired and slower in his movements, and he came in for a muffin and a coffee the way he apparently always did on Tuesdays, and stopped when he saw Nathan behind the counter. There was a moment of assessment on both sides. "Nathan Sterling," Joe said. "Joe," Nathan said. Joe set his wallet on the counter, a gesture that said he intended to stay and was deciding whether that was going to be comfortable. "I heard you were in town. About 2 months now. Your father would have been—" Joe stopped, recalibrated. He would have had something to say about it. "He would have had a lot to say about most things," Nathan said. "That was always true?" Joe looked at him steadily. He was the kind of man who had watched a lot of things happen and had reached the age where he could say so plainly. "You didn't come back for the funeral," he said. "No," Nathan said. "I didn't." "He asked about you," Joe said. "Not at the end. Before that. When he still could." Nathan held Joe's gaze and felt the specific weight of that sentence, not as an accusation, which it wasn't, but as information that had no comfortable resting place. He'd known, in the abstract, that his father had declined over a year before he died. He'd known it the way you know things from a distance, where the knowledge sits without being fully felt. "I know," Nathan said. Joe nodded slowly. He picked up his wallet. "I'm not saying it to make you feel bad," he said. "I'm saying it because I think you already feel bad, and I've been watching you be here for 2 months, and I thought you should hear from someone that—" He paused. "That you showing up now means something too, even if it's late." He ordered his muffin and his coffee and paid, and went to a corner table with his newspaper, and Nathan stood at the counter and breathed carefully for a moment. Emily, who had been in the back and had caught enough of it coming through the pass-through, appeared in the kitchen doorway and said nothing. Just looked at him for a moment. "I'm okay," he said. "I know," she said. "Joe's a good man." "Yeah," Nathan said. "He is." He went back to the prep counter, and they kept working, and after a while it was okay the way things eventually become okay when you let them sit without fighting them. That evening, Nathan drove out to the cemetery at the edge of town. He'd been putting this off since he arrived, in the way that you put off things that require you to be somewhere you don't have a defense prepared for. He went alone, leaving Lily with Marcus, not telling anyone where he was going. His father's grave was in the older section, a simple headstone. Thomas William Sterling, dates, no quote. Nathan's mother was beside him, her headstone slightly greener with age since she'd been there longer. He stood between them for a while. He didn't talk out loud. He wasn't that kind of person, and he didn't think his parents had been that kind of people either. He just stood there in the early evening with the grass long around the stones and the light going and felt the full weight of the years and the distance and the choices that couldn't be undone. He'd built $300 million and missed his father's last years and his father's funeral, and had justified it to himself in 100 ways that were all technically true, and none of which, standing here now, felt like enough. He stayed for 20 minutes. On the walk back to the car, he called his therapist in Manhattan. She answered on the third ring, which surprised him. He usually left messages. "Nathan," she said, "it's been a few weeks." "I know," he said. "I went to see my father's grave today." A pause. "How are you?" "Complicated," he said. "But okay, the complicated kind of okay." "Tell me," she said, and he talked to her for 40 minutes while he drove back to town. And it was the most honest conversation he'd had with her in 2 years of sessions. And when it ended, she said, "It sounds like you're doing the thing." "What thing?" "The thing I kept trying to get you to do," she said, "stopping long enough to be somewhere." "It took a piece of purple crayon and a promise I don't remember making," he said. "Most important things start like that," she said, "messily, accidentally." He went back to the inn and checked on Lily, who was asleep with a library book on her face. She'd gotten a library card 2 weeks ago, her own idea, presented to Nathan with the card itself as evidence of the accomplishment, and sat beside her bed for a while in the dark. He thought about his mother, who had died when he was 8 years old on his birthday, which was why he'd written that promise. He understood now. He'd been at school, confused about why his birthday felt like the worst day of his life instead of the best. And Emily had shared her lunch with him and hadn't asked questions. And at some point during recess, he'd found the piece of notebook paper and the purple crayon and had written something that was probably not specifically about marriage, not at age 8, but about the thing that marriage was a word for: permanence, staying, the person who doesn't leave. He'd been looking for that since he was 8 years old. He'd spent 14 years running from the place that had it. The renovation on the Route 9 building started in August, 6 weeks after the purchase closed. Nathan hired a local contractor, a woman named Sue Briggs, whose company had done most of the significant work in Cedar Creek for the past decade, and whose assessment of the building's bones had been reassuringly undramatic. "Structure's good," Sue had said, walking him through the space with a flashlight. "Electrical needs total replacement. Plumbing's survivable, but you'll want to budget for it. Everything else is cosmetic." She'd paused at the large back room that had been the hardware store's stock area. "This'll make a good shop space. High ceiling, good natural light if you put the windows in right." "That's the trade's workshop," Nathan said. "Then yeah," Sue said. "That'll work." The first day of demolition, Nathan brought Lily to watch, which she'd specifically requested. She stood in the parking lot in her jacket with the rock. Emily had given it back at some point, and Lily had accepted the return with the solemnity of a thing being put back in its rightful place, and watched Sue's crew take out the boarded windows with the focused attention she brought to all processes that involved tools. "Is this yours?" Lily asked, looking at the building. "Technically, yes," Nathan said, "but not like the bakery is Emily's." He looked at her. "What do you mean?" "Emily's bakery is hers," Lily said, with the certainty of a kid who had thought about the distinction. "This is yours to give away." He was quiet for a moment. Sue Briggs, 20 feet away, was directing her crew with the efficiency of someone who had stopped waiting for other people's conversations to finish. "Yeah," Nathan said. "That's exactly right." Lily nodded, satisfied, and went back to watching the window removal. September moved in with the particular quality of early fall in the region. Still warm in the afternoons, cooler in the mornings, the light going golden earlier each day, the trees at the edge of town just beginning to consider their options. Nathan had been in Cedar Creek for 4 months. He'd stopped counting weeks. He'd rented a house, a 2-bedroom on Maple Street, 3 blocks from the bakery, nothing remarkable about it except that it had a yard with an oak tree that Lily had immediately identified as climbable, and a kitchen with enough counter space to practice what she was learning from Emily. Moving out of the inn had been practical, not symbolic, or so Nathan told himself. The truth was slightly more layered. He'd moved because staying in the inn had started to feel like not entirely committing, like keeping one foot on the threshold, and he'd made a decision in that boardroom call 3 months ago that deserved to be followed through properly. Harold Finch had been visibly moved when Nathan checked out. He'd shaken Nathan's hand and held it slightly longer than a handshake required. 3 blocks, Nathan had reminded him. "I'll still see you." "It's different when you're not under my roof," Harold said, with the dignity of a man who took hospitality seriously. "Harold," Nathan said, "you texted the group chat about me." "I was excited," Harold said. Lily had hugged Harold on the way out, which had resolved the matter. The house on Maple Street had a back door that opened onto the yard, and in the mornings before school, Lily had enrolled in Cedar Creek Elementary in September, a decision she had participated in and accepted with the matter-of-fact adaptability of a child who had spent the summer becoming part of a place. Nathan would make coffee and stand at the back door and listen to the town wake up, and he would think about nothing in particular, and this was something he had not been able to do for most of his adult life. Lily liked school. This was not guaranteed. Nathan had prepared himself for resistance, for difficulty, for the complicated social territory of a child arriving mid-year in a class where everyone had known each other since kindergarten. But Cedar Creek Elementary was small enough that a new kid was interesting rather than threatening, and Lily, who had been in her own way always interesting, found her footing inside of 2 weeks. She came home reporting specific people and specific events and specific injustices in the cafeteria seating arrangement with the engaged irritation of a child who cared about the place she was in. On a Friday afternoon, 3 weeks into the school year, she came home and announced that her class was doing a family heritage project, and she needed to bring in something that represented her family. "What kind of something?" Nathan asked. "Something meaningful," Lily said, "like an object or a photo or a story." Nathan thought about this for a moment. "What are you thinking?" Lily looked at the refrigerator where she'd taped a photograph Emily had given her, an old one from the bakery's early days, showing Emily's mother in the same kitchen where Lily spent her mornings. Lily had asked Emily for it specifically, had carried it home in her jacket pocket, and taped it up herself. "I want to bring the photograph," Lily said, "and I want to tell the story of the bakery." "That's Emily's family," Nathan said gently. "Not technically ours." Lily looked at him with the expression of a child who believes an adult is being unnecessarily technical. "It's my family," she said, as though this were self-evident. He didn't argue with it. He called Emily that evening and told her. There was a pause on the phone. "What did you say?" Emily asked. "I told her it was your family's story." "And she said?" "She said it was hers," Nathan said, and looked at me like I was being obtuse. Another pause. Longer. "Is it okay with you?" Nathan asked. "If she brings the photo and tells the bakery story?" "Nathan," Emily said, and her voice had a quality he'd only heard a few times. Quieter than usual, the careful neutrality gone, something underneath it that she wasn't trying to hide. "Of course it's okay. She can have the photograph forever if she wants it." "She might want it forever," Nathan said. "I know," Emily said. They stayed on the phone for a moment without talking, which was something they'd started doing, not hanging up immediately, letting the silence be part of the conversation. And Nathan stood in his kitchen on Maple Street with the phone against his ear and the sound of Lily moving around upstairs and the particular September dark outside the window. Emily, he said. Yeah. I need to tell you something. A beat. Okay. Not on the phone, he said. Tomorrow. Can you give me 10 minutes tomorrow before opening? You're going to make me wait until tomorrow? She said, and there was something in it, dry but alive, the wire of something running underneath. Yes, he said. Okay, she said. 10 minutes before opening, don't be late. He was not late. He was there at 6:19 and the bakery lights were already on, and Emily opened the door before he could knock with the expression of someone who had been waiting and was not going to say so. She had coffee ready. 2 cups, on the counter, which told him she'd decided this was going to be a seated conversation. He sat. She sat across from him, not behind the counter, across from it, which was different. She'd given them the same side of the equation. He looked at her. I moved here, he said. I know you moved here, she said. You're on Maple Street. I moved here, he said. Not for the project and not for 3 more months. I moved here. Cedar Creek. This is where I live now. Emily was very still. The restructuring with the board gave me the operational freedom I needed, he said. The house is a rental for now, but I've been looking at properties, not to buy immediately, just looking, because I need to know what I'm committing to before I commit to it. Lily's in school. I've got work building with the Route 9 project. This is... He stopped, looked at his coffee cup. This is where I want to be. Because of Cedar Creek, Emily said. It wasn't quite a question and wasn't quite a statement. Because of Cedar Creek, he said, and because of you. She was quiet. Outside, a car passed on Main Street. I'm not saying that to pressure you, he said quickly. I need you to know that. I'm not... This isn't a move that requires anything from you. I'm not telling you because I want something back tonight. I'm telling you because I've been not telling you for 4 months, because I was worried about the pressure of it, and not telling you was starting to feel dishonest. Emily looked at him for a long moment. He made himself hold the look, not look away, because this was the thing you did when you meant it. You held the look. You've been here 4 months, she said. Yes. And you're not leaving. No. That's... She stopped, started again. Nathan, I need you to understand something. I've had people leave, my sister, my mom, you, before. She pressed her lips together. I don't do well with people who leave. I know that's... She shook her head. I know how that sounds. It sounds like someone who's been burned enough to be careful, Nathan said. It sounds completely reasonable. I'm not asking you to prove anything, she said. I'm just telling you what it is, what it means for me. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to trust it tonight. I'm just telling you the truth so you have it. She looked at her coffee cup. He looked at his. Outside, the town was finishing its process of waking up. The distant sound of someone opening a shop gate, a truck on the highway half a mile off, a dog somewhere. I have feelings for you, Emily said, at the counter in her bakery at 6:23 in the morning. In the plain way she said everything true. I've had feelings for you since you came back, probably... She stopped. Probably for longer than that, but that's not useful information right now. It's useful to me, Nathan said. It doesn't change where we are, she said, which is, I have feelings and I'm scared and I need more time. Those things are all true at once. Okay, he said. Okay? You're not saying no, he said. You're saying not yet. That's different. She looked at him. I can do not yet, he said. I've been here 4 months and I'm not leaving. Not yet is fine. Something in her expression shifted to, not dramatically, not a transformation, just the small movement of something that had been held tight, releasing a degree of its tension. She picked up her coffee cup. You're better at this than I expected, she said. At what? Waiting, she said. The version of you I remember was not good at waiting. The version of me you remember was 18 and an idiot, Nathan said. You were, she agreed, without malice, and got up to start the morning prep. And he got up and went to the sink and started on the dishes, and the bakery opened at 6:30 with both of them in it, which was how the mornings worked now. October brought the Route 9 project to its first visible milestone. The exterior of the building cleaned up, new windows installed, the parking lot repaved, the sign above the door reading Cedar Creek Skills Center in clean navy letters that Sue Briggs's crew had put up on a Tuesday morning while Vic Caruso stood in the parking lot with his hands in his pockets, looking at it with the expression of a man deciding whether something was real. "It's real," Nathan told him, which was what Vic had said to him 6 months ago when Nathan had asked if he could run the program. Vic looked at him sideways. "You remember that." "I remember everything people tell me when they have conditions," Nathan said. Vic almost smiled. "Interior finishes another 3 weeks?" "Sue says 2, which means 3, Nathan said. "Good contractor," Vic said. "Honest timeline." The soft opening was set for November. Limited enrollment, the first cohort of 12 students, 3 instructors including Vic. Dr. Reyes had sent home information to the high school families 2 weeks prior and had been met with a response that surprised even her. 43 inquiries for 12 spots. She called Nathan to tell him. "That's 3.5 times your capacity," she said. "For the first cohort," he said. "We scale from there." "You're going to need a second building," she said. "I know," he said, "one thing at a time." He told Emily about the enrollment numbers that evening. She was at the house on Maple Street. She came for dinner twice a week, a thing that had developed without formal arrangement, the way the best things in Cedar Creek seemed to develop, through repetition rather than declaration. Lily cooked one of the 2 nights, simple things she'd been learning, and the kitchen usually looked like a weather event had occurred in it, but the food was edible and sometimes better than edible. 43, Emily said. For 12 spots, Nathan confirmed. She turned her wine glass in her hands. That's families who don't want to lose their kids to the city. That's what I figured. Or kids who don't want to leave but felt like they had to. She looked at the table. I was one of those. I just had a different reason to stay. I know, Nathan said. That's why I built it. She looked at him. Not just you, he said, but people like you. People who should have had the option of choosing instead of just, he shrugged, instead of it being the only thing that made sense. It was her own words. She recognized them and said nothing for a moment, and Lily came out of the kitchen with 3 bowls of something she'd been working on, a soup, ambitious, involving corn and potato, and an amount of black pepper that Nathan would have questioned if he'd known about it in advance, and set them on the table with the focused pride of a cook presenting work they believe in. Taste it first, Lily said, and then tell me if it needs salt. They tasted it. Salt, Nathan and Emily said simultaneously. Lily nodded seriously. I thought so, but I wanted confirmation. She went back to the kitchen. Nathan and Emily looked at each other across the table, and Emily made the sound. The real laugh. The one with the crack in it. The one that only came out when she wasn't managing it. And Nathan thought that this was the table he wanted to be at. This specific one, with the imperfect soup and the wrong amount of pepper, and the 7-year-old in the kitchen consulting herself about salt. Not perfect. Not the version of his life where everything had been arranged correctly. This one, with its rough edges and its salt deficit and its ongoing negotiations and its not yets. This one. Later, after dinner, Lily fell asleep on the couch with a book open on her chest. Not on her face this time, progress. And Nathan and Emily sat on the back steps in the October cold with coffee and the oak tree going orange above them and the particular quiet of a small town on a weeknight. I went to see my father's grave, Nathan said. He'd been meaning to tell her. He wasn't sure why he'd waited, except that it had felt like something to carry alone until he was ready to put it down. Emily was quiet. In August, he said, after Joe came into the bakery. Joe told me, she said. He said you seemed okay. I was okay, Nathan said. Eventually, it took a few days. He looked at the oak tree. I keep thinking about what I owe people who are gone, whether there's a math to it. There isn't, Emily said. I know there isn't, but I keep... He exhaled. My dad and I had a complicated thing. He wasn't easy, but he wasn't bad either. He was a man with a lot of problems and some good qualities, and I left before we figured out how to be okay with each other. And now I can't fix it. I can just... He stopped. I can just make sure I don't do the same thing with the people who are still here. Emily set her coffee cup on the step beside her. She reached over and put her hand on top of his. Not the light momentary touch she'd done before. In the bakery, the wait, give her a minute hand. This was deliberate. This was staying. He turned his hand over under hers. They sat in the cold with the coffee and the oak tree and the sleeping child inside, and the town making its quiet sounds around them. And Nathan Sterling held Emily Carter's hand for the first time since they were 8 years old at a fire that couldn't be saved, and thought that some things took exactly as long as they needed to. Not less. Not more. Just the right amount of time. Her hand stayed in his through most of that October evening, until the cold got serious enough that they had to go inside, and even then neither of them said anything about it. Not to name it, not to define it, not to make it into a conversation it wasn't ready to be. They just went inside, checked on Lily, washed the dinner dishes in the kitchen together, and Emily went home at 9:30 with her jacket zipped and her keys in her hand and a look on her face that Nathan recognized as a person carrying something carefully so it didn't spill. He stood at the front door and watched her walk down Maple Street until she turned the corner, and then he went back inside and stood in his kitchen for a while doing nothing in particular. Not yet, she'd said. He'd said he could do not yet. He meant it. That was the thing about meaning something. It didn't come with a timer or an expiration. It just sat there being true while the days moved around it. And the days moved. November came in cold and gray, and the Skills Center opened its doors to its first cohort of 12 students on a Tuesday morning that Vic Caruso would later describe, to anyone who asked, as the best Tuesday of his professional life. Nathan was there, but not in the way of a man receiving credit. He stood at the back of the room while Vic introduced the program, and the instructors and the students introduced themselves one by one, and he watched the faces of the 12 kids, 16, 17, 18 years old, a mix of nervous and trying not to show it, and thought about what it meant to be given an option. Not pushed toward a door, not told what you'd be good at, not handed a path and told to walk it, just given the option to try a thing, to be competent at it, to see whether it was yours. He thought about Lily saying, "This is yours to give away." She'd been right about that. The best things he'd done in Cedar Creek had been the ones he'd given away. The time, the attention, the willingness to show up without an agenda. The Skills Center was that, at scale. After the students filed into their first sessions, Dr. Reyes found him near the door. "You didn't say anything," she said, meaning the opening. "Vic said everything that needed saying," Nathan said. She looked at him with the assessment of a woman who had been in education long enough to know the difference between people who built things for the credit and people who built them for the thing. "The second cohort applications open next month," she said. "We already have 11 inquiries." "Scale from there," Nathan said. "You said that before." "I meant it both times." She smiled, the quick, real kind, and went to check on her students. Emily came by the Skills Center that afternoon, after she'd closed the bakery. Nathan wasn't surprised. Cedar Creek was small, and she'd known about the opening, and she was too interested in the town not to look. He was in the back workshop with Vic when he heard her voice in the front room, talking to one of the other instructors, and he stayed where he was and let her look around without making it about him. When she found him in the workshop, she stood in the doorway and looked at the space. The benches, the tools mounted neatly on their boards, the clean smell of new wood and machine oil, and said nothing for a moment. "It's good," she said. "It works," he said, which was his version of the same thing. She walked into the room slowly, the way you walk through a space you're reading. She ran a hand along one of the workbenches. "Sue Briggs did good work. She always does," he said. Emily stopped at the far wall where Vic had put up a simple board with the program's stated purpose written in block letters. Not a mission statement, which Nathan had specifically said he didn't want, but a plain sentence. "This is a place to learn something real." Below it were 8 photographs of Cedar Creek as it had been, spanning decades. The factories, the farms, the main street at different points in its history, the people who had built and worked and stayed. Emily looked at the photographs for a long time. "My mother's in one of these," she said. Nathan came to stand beside her. Emily pointed. "Third from the right. a photograph from what looked like the late 80s, the bakery's front counter with two women behind it, one of them unmistakably Emily's mother, younger, laughing at something off camera. Vic found it in the Historical Society archive, Nathan said. I asked him to use local photographs. I didn't know your mother was in one. I'm glad she is, Emily said. They stood at the wall together, looking at the photographs, and Nathan thought about what it meant to build something that contained the past as well as the future, that didn't pretend the town had always been fine, that acknowledged what it had lost and still believed something could be made from what was left. That was the actual belief underneath everything, he realized. Not that money fixed things. It didn't, couldn't, and he knew that clearly enough by now. Not that one person swooping in could reverse the slow erosion of a place, but that showing up consistently, putting real things in the ground, treating people as worth the investment, that accumulated. It didn't transform, not quickly, not cleanly. It just slowly added weight to the right side of the scale. He said none of this to Emily. It wasn't the kind of thing you needed to say. She was standing in the room, and she could see it, and she was the smartest person he knew, and she understood it already. She left at 5 to prep for the next morning's early batch, and Nathan stayed to help Vic lock up, and the town went on into its November evening. The weeks between November and the following spring were the most ordinary of Nathan's adult life, and he did not mean that as a complaint. Ordinary had become, he'd discovered, the thing he'd been trying to buy for 14 years without knowing it was what he was trying to buy. The morning walks to the bakery, Lily at the kitchen table doing homework with her tongue pressed between her teeth in concentration. Dinners on Maple Street twice a week with Emily, who brought things sometimes, a jar of the cranberry preserves she made in batches, a book she thought Lily would like, once a replacement dish towel to replace the one Nathan had destroyed by using it to handle a hot pan, and who sat at the table and ate imperfect food and argued with Lily about the carrot situation, which had not been resolved, and drank coffee that went cold because the conversation kept being more interesting than the coffee. He and Emily moved slowly. This was deliberate on both their parts, and occasionally uncomfortable in the way that slow things are when you want them to move faster, but know better than to push. They had one actual argument in December about something that started as a disagreement about the Skills Center's culinary curriculum. Emily felt strongly that knife skills should be foundational, and Nathan had suggested starting with baking as more approachable, and she'd looked at him with the particular expression of a professional being, advised about her field by someone who had been making scones for 5 months, and expanded into something larger, something about expertise and respect, and the line between investing in something and trying to control it. There's a version of this, Emily said, in the bakery after closing, her voice level in the careful way of someone keeping it level deliberately, where you build something in this town, and because you paid for it, you think your opinion about how it runs is the relevant one. I don't think that, Nathan said. You suggested. I suggested, Emily, not decided. I asked Vic about it, and he said the same thing you just said, and I dropped it. But you suggested it in the first place. I was wrong, he said. I said so. I'm saying so now. He looked at her. I'm going to be wrong sometimes. You know that. She looked at him, still holding the level carefully. I know the difference, he said, between funding something and owning it. I'm not trying to own the curriculum. I asked a question from ignorance. That's different. The careful level in her voice softened a degree. You need to be more careful about the questions you ask in rooms where people know who's funding the operation. I know, he said. You're right. She turned back to her closing tasks. He helped without being asked. After 10 minutes, she said, without looking up, Knife skills first, then baking. That's the correct order. Knife skills first, he agreed. It was not a clean resolution. The air was still slightly charged for the rest of the evening. But it was a real one. The kind where both people had said the actual thing rather than managing around it. They were both people who said the actual thing. Sometimes the actual thing was uncomfortable, and they were both capable of sitting with discomfort without running from it. Nathan thought this was one of the most important things two people could do together. Christmas came to Cedar Creek with the modest commitment of a town that had been doing Christmas the same way for decades. Lights on Main Street, a tree in the park, The diner running its special menu, Harold's Inn fully booked for the first time in years with people coming home for the holidays. Lily made an ornament at school, a painted ceramic shape that was intended to be a star and looked more like a lopsided sun, and hung it at the exact center of the tree in the Maple Street house with the seriousness of a person placing something important. Emily came for Christmas Eve dinner, and her father came too. Thomas Carter, 68, who moved carefully on his rebuilt knees and who had the eyes of someone who'd been watching his daughter closely for years and was now revising his predictions. He shook Nathan's hand at the door and said, "I remember you," in a tone that was not unfriendly, but was not yet decided either. "I remember you too, Mr. Carter," Nathan said. "You once told me I'd tied my shoes wrong." Thomas Carter looked down at Nathan's shoes, then back up. "You were tying them wrong," he said, and came inside. Dinner was loud and imperfect, and the turkey was slightly overdone because Lily had taken charge of the timer and had not accounted for the difference between the timer going off and the turkey being done, a distinction that Nathan had also not known to account for. Emily handled the overdone turkey with the equanimity of a professional who had rescued worse, adding pan sauce and an air of absolute confidence that converted the situation. Thomas Carter ate 2 full plates and told the story of the 1978 flood, which Nathan had now heard from Harold enough times that he could have added details, and Lily listened with the same complete attention she gave Harold's version, because the story was good regardless of how many times you'd heard it, and she understood that listening was a form of respect. After dinner, while Lily was showing Thomas Carter her library book collection and explaining her system for ranking them, a complex system involving dots of different colors that she had invented herself, Nathan and Emily stood in the kitchen doing dishes, and Emily said quietly, "He likes you." Nathan glanced toward the living room. "He hasn't said much to me." "That's how he shows he likes you," she said. "If he didn't like you, he'd be making conversation." Nathan thought about this. "That's a system." "It's his system," she said. "He's had 68 years to develop it." He passed her a dish. She dried it. The Christmas Eve sounds of the house moved around them. Thomas Carter's voice, Lily explaining her dot system, a car going past outside. And Nathan thought about his own father, who had also had systems that Nathan had spent years not knowing how to read, and thought that there was a specific grief in understanding someone's system only after it was too late to use the understanding. He hoped Thomas Carter had more time. He hoped Thomas Carter's system would have more chances to register. "Emily," he said. "I want to ask you something." She looked at him, dish towel in hand. "Not tonight," he said. "Not now. I wanted you to know that I have something I want to ask you, and I'm going to ask it when the time is right. And I'm not telling you that to pressure you or to—" He stopped. "I just didn't want to do it without you knowing it was coming, because you don't like surprises that move the ground." She was looking at him with a very particular expression, the assessing one, but something else underneath it now, something that wasn't assessment, something quieter and more unguarded than that. "Okay," she said. "Okay, you understand, or okay, you—" "Okay, I understand," she said, "and okay." She set the dish towel down. "Okay." He didn't know exactly what the second okay covered. He thought it might cover more than one thing. He let it be what it was and passed her another dish. Spring came the way it always did in Cedar Creek, gradually and then all at once, mud season first, the particular brown-gray of early March that made the town look like a faded photograph of itself. And then suddenly 1 week in April, when everything decided to go green simultaneously, the trees and the creek banks and the grass along the roads, a collective decision that winter was done and something else was starting. The Skills Center had finished its first cohort and enrolled its second, 22 students this time. And Vic was interviewing a fourth instructor in the culinary component, taught knife skills first in the correct order, had a wait list. Sue Briggs had been contracted for a modest expansion to the workshop space. Dr. Reyes sent Nathan a data summary at the end of the first academic year that showed 14 of the initial 12 cohort students either employed locally or enrolled in further training, and 2 who had gone to programs in the city with certifications that hadn't existed for them before. 14 of 12, Nathan said when she gave him the number. 2 came back to audit the advanced session, Dr. Reyes said. So the denominator is actually 14. He kept the summary in the top drawer of the desk in his home office, which was the smallest room in the Maple Street house, and which Lily had painted a color she called Sirius Blue on a Saturday in March, getting paint on the floor, and both of them, and which Nathan had decided was the best room in the house. In April, he drove out to the creek. He drove out early, before Lily's school and before the bakery opened, in the pale morning that still had cold in it even though the calendar said spring. He parked on the road and walked the path through the oaks, past the carved initials. NS plus EC. Still there, more faded now, but there. And down to the bank where the water ran clear over the same flat gray rocks. He sat on the fallen tree, more rotted now, would probably go in another year or two, and looked at the creek for a while. He thought about his mother, who had died on his birthday, and whose absence had shaped everything that came after. He thought about the 8-year-old who had written a promise in purple crayon because he needed a word for the thing he was looking for, and didn't know any word more specific than the one he'd used. He thought about 14 years of running and $300 million and all the things money could organize and couldn't touch. He thought about Emily saying, "I need to know the thing I built was actually built by me." He thought about Lily's laugh coming back. He thought about a striped rock being offered to someone who needed it more. He thought about his father's grave and Joe Abrams's hand and the handshake across Vic Caruso's kitchen table and Harold Finch's face when they checked out of the inn. He thought about Dr. Reyes's 14 of 12 and the smell of the bakery at 6 in the morning and the way Emily moved in her kitchen, economical and certain, the way she moved through everything she knew and did well. He thought about all of it for a while, sitting on the rotting log above the creek with the spring morning coming up around him. Then he took out his phone and called Emily. She picked up on the second ring. "It's 6:15, she said. "I know. Are you at the bakery?" "Where else would I be at 6:15, sir?" "Can you give me an hour? I'll be there at 7:30. A pause. "What's happening?" "Nothing bad," he said. I want to take you somewhere before the day starts. Can Marcus take Lily to school?" "Nathan, please," he said. A longer pause, then, 7:30, she said, "and bring coffee from the diner, not gas station." "Okay." "The large one." "Okay, Emily." He went to the diner. Ray handed him 2 large coffees without Nathan having to explain in front anything, because Ray had been watching this town for 30 years and had good instincts. Nathan drove to the bakery, and Emily came out at 7:30 in her jacket with flour already on her left sleeve, and she looked at him with the careful assessment she always brought to situations she hadn't fully mapped. "Where are we going?" she asked. "The creek," he said. She got in the car. They drove without talking, which was fine, which was one of the things about Emily that Nathan had understood since they were children. She didn't feel silence because she was uncomfortable. She left it because silence was sometimes the right thing to leave. The road out to the path, the morning light through the oaks, the sound of the water as they walked down toward the bank. He was carrying something under his arm. She'd noticed it when he picked her up but hadn't asked. It was wrapped in a cloth, not heavily, just covered. She watched him carry it and kept her question. At the bank, he stopped. He turned to face her. Emily Carter, at 31, stood at the edge of the creek where they'd spent 100 childhood afternoons, with flour on her sleeve and coffee in her hand, and the particular expression of a woman who has spent the past year watching someone try to become the person they were always capable of being and has been paying close enough attention to know whether it took. It had taken. He could see it in the way she looked at him. Not the careful neutral, not the assessment, not the deliberate distance she'd kept for months while things developed at the pace they needed. She looked at him the way she'd looked at the Skills Center wall of photographs, like something that contained the past and the present at once. Like something that had been built slowly and was still standing. He unwrapped the thing under his arm. It was the framed promise, the original from Alderman's window. The Hendersons had given it to him 2 weeks ago when he'd gone to ask. They'd looked at each other and then at him, and Linda Henderson had said, "We thought you'd come for it eventually," and wrapped it herself in the cloth he was still holding. The purple crayon was faded but legible. The misspellings were still there. Bacchus cried. Emily looked at it for a long moment. "I've been thinking about what I wanted to say," Nathan said. I've written it in my head about 6 times. I had a version that was, I don't know, more eloquent, referenced things, made a case. He looked at the frame in his hands. But you know me well enough that I don't think you want the version where I made a case. I think you want the real one. Yes, she said. He looked up at her. The real one is that I've been choosing you every day for a year, he said. Not because of this, he held up the frame. Not because of what we were when we were 8 years old, not because Cedar Creek is small and you're the best thing in it. I've been choosing you because you tell me true things and you don't make it easier than it is. And you taught my daughter that double blueberry means more blueberries. And that was somehow exactly what she needed. Because you're the person I want to be in the room with when something goes wrong. Because when I was standing on the sidewalk looking at this, he looked at the frame, I wasn't thinking about a childhood promise. I was thinking that I'd spent 14 years building the wrong life, and the right one had been here the whole time. Emily was holding her coffee cup with both hands. Her eyes were bright and not entirely dry. I'm not the same person who left, he said. I know that's easy to say, but I also think you've been watching closely enough to know it's true. I have, she said. It is. I'm going to make mistakes, he said. I already have. I'm going to be wrong about things and suggest the wrong sequence for the culinary curriculum and ask questions I should know the answer to. Nathan, she said, I want you to know what you're getting. I'm not proposing a clean version of this. I know what I'm getting, she said. I've been watching it walk into my bakery at 6 a.m. for a year. He looked at her. I'm not saying yes to who you're trying to be, she said. I'm saying yes to who you already are. Scone technique and awkward questions and all of it. She set her coffee down on a nearby rock and looked at him squarely, with no neutral and no careful and no distance. So ask me. He didn't get down on one knee because the creek bank was muddy and the moment didn't require theater. He just stood in front of her and held the frame and said, Marry me, Emily, not because of this, the frame, but because I've spent a year choosing you every single day and I want to keep doing it for every day after this. She was quiet for a moment, a long enough moment that the creek made several inches of progress over its rocks. Then she said, Yes, just that. Simple, direct, hers. The way she said everything true. He put the frame down on the log and they were close enough that stepping forward was barely a step. And when he put his arms around her and she put her arms around him, it wasn't electric or cinematic or any of the things stories make it. It was just right. The specific rightness of something being in its correct place after being somewhere wrong for a very long time. She was cold from the morning and she still smelled like the bakery, and she was not a small woman who fit perfectly against him like something designed. She was a real person with sharp elbows who jabbed one of them into his ribs in the process of this, and they both laughed, and that was better than any version of it that didn't involve the elbow. He pulled back to look at her face. She was crying, just a little, which was the limited way Emily Carter cried. Enough to acknowledge the feeling, not enough to make a scene. Your mascara, he said. I know, she said. Don't. I wasn't going to say anything else. Good. They stood at the creek for a while, his arm around her, her shoulder against him, the April morning finishing its process of becoming itself. The trees were green. The water ran clear. At the oak with the carved initials, a bird was doing something architectural in the higher branches, all industry and intention. Lily's reaction, that evening at the Maple Street house, was characteristic. Nathan had picked her up from school, and they'd made dinner together. Real dinner, not ambitious, pasta and a salad, that Lily assembled with the precision she brought to all assembly tasks. And after dinner, he'd told her. She listened to the whole thing with the serious face of a child receiving important information. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Where's the ring? We didn't talk about a ring yet. Lily considered this. You should get her one that's not too flashy, she said. She doesn't like flashy. I know, Nathan said. And it should have something meaningful about it, not just a stone. She thought about it. Maybe it could have the creek in it somehow, like a stone from the creek. Nathan looked at his daughter. Or something, Lily said, pulling her plate closer. I'm just saying there should be meaning. There was a stone setter in the next town over who worked with local materials. Nathan found her the following week. He brought 3 flat stones from the creek bank. Not the quartz-striped one. That was Lily's. That was currently back in Lily's pocket where it belonged. And the stone setter looked at them with the critical attention of a craftsperson being asked to work with unconventional materials and said, "This one," and held up the smallest, smoothest one. "I can set it in a band. It won't look like a jeweler's ring." "Good," Nathan said. "It shouldn't." "She'll know it's from somewhere specific," the stone setter said. "That's the point," Nathan said. He gave the ring to Emily on a Tuesday, which was their day. The day she'd first let him into the bakery before opening. The day most of the things that mattered had started. He put it on the counter beside her morning coffee without announcement and let her find it. She looked at it for a long moment, picked it up, turned it in her fingers, looking at the creek stone set in its simple band. "Lily," she said. "She made a recommendation," Nathan said. "It should have meaning," Emily said, which was apparently enough of a quote for Nathan to know that Lily had been consulted directly. "She approached me about it," Nathan said. "I want to be clear." Emily put the ring on, looked at her hand, looked at him. "It fits," she said. "I measured," he said, "while you were sleeping. While I was—" She stopped. "When were you in my apartment while I was sleeping?" "That came out wrong," Nathan said. She looked at him. He watched her decide not to pursue it, which was its own form of mercy. "It fits," she said again, and went back to her prep, and he poured himself a coffee and started on the dishes, and the bakery morning went on around them like all the other mornings. The wedding was in April of the following year, which meant they had a full year to argue about it, which they used. Not badly. The arguments were the productive kind, the kind where 2 people who each have strong opinions about how things should be done negotiate towards something neither of them would have come up with alone. Emily wanted small. Nathan wanted everyone who mattered to be there. These turned out not to be mutually exclusive positions, once they defined their terms. Small meant no event planner, no catering company, no white tent with a DJ. Everyone who mattered meant Harold and Marcus and Dr. Reyes and Vic Caruso and Joe Abrams and Sue Briggs and Ray from the diner and Mrs. Patterson, who made excellent croissants, and Gerald from the hardware store, and the whole Cedar Creek infrastructure of people who had woven themselves into the past year. It came to 61 people, which Emily considered large and Nathan considered intimate. And they agreed to disagree on the classification and had the wedding in the park by the creek where the fair ran every June, which was Emily's choice and Nathan's agreement without negotiation because it was clearly right. Thomas Carter walked his daughter down the grass path between the folding chairs, moving carefully on his rebuilt knees, with the expression of a man doing the most important thing he'd done in years and knowing it. He shook Nathan's hand at the end of the path and held it for a moment, longer than a handshake required, the way Harold had held it when Nathan checked out of the inn, the way men held things when they meant them without the vocabulary to say so. Lily walked beside Emily. This had been Lily's idea, offered to Emily with the same directness she brought to all her important proposals. "I want to walk beside you," she'd said, "not in front, like with flowers. Beside." Emily had looked at her for a moment, and Nathan had looked away, and the matter had been settled. Lily wore a blue dress that she had specifically approved, and navy shoes that she had specifically approved, and the quartz-striped rock in her dress pocket, because she had decided it was a good luck object, and there was no occasion on which it was more appropriate. She walked beside Emily Carter through 61 people standing in the April park, serious and straight and 8 years old, and took her place beside her father at the end of the path with the composure of someone who had practiced and also the bright-eyed alertness of someone for whom this was real, this was actual, this was her life rearranging itself into something better. The ceremony was short. This was by design. The officiant, a woman named Barbara Close, who had been performing Cedar Creek's weddings for 20 years and had the particular skill of saying the true things without inflating them, said the words that needed saying and left room for the 2 of them to say their own. Nathan had written his. He'd written them 4 times and thrown out the first 3 and kept the 4th, which was the shortest. "I spent 14 years building things I thought would make me feel something," he said, looking at Emily in the April light. "And then I came home and spent a year learning that the feeling was here the whole time. I'm not going to be perfect at this. I'm going to be wrong sometimes and stubborn sometimes, and I'm going to suggest the wrong sequence for the culinary curriculum more than once. He heard her exhale a half laugh. But every day, the same way I've been doing it for a year, I'm going to choose you. That's what I've got. It's everything I've got. Emily's were shorter still. You came back, she said. You stayed. You showed up every day for a year when you didn't have to. That's the most anyone's ever done. She looked at him with the direct look, the real one, the one with no neutral and no managed distance. I don't need a promise. I need exactly what you've already been doing. Barbara Close said the words. They said yes to each other. Lily, between them, pressed the rock in her pocket with both hands and looked at the sky with the expression of someone deciding that everything had worked out the way it was supposed to. The party afterward was Cedar Creek at its best, which meant it was loud and slightly disorganized, and the food was extraordinary because Emily had made most of it herself and refused to be talked out of it, and Harold's toast went 7 minutes over the agreed-upon length and included 4 separate references to the group chat which Nathan would have objected to if he hadn't been laughing too hard to speak. Marcus gave a toast that was 2 sentences long, which was perfect. Dr. Reyes danced with Vic Caruso, which surprised everyone, including both of them. Joe Abrams sat in the corner with Thomas Carter, and they talked for 3 hours about nothing Nathan could hear. And Thomas Carter's face, by the end of it, had the expression of a man who had needed that particular conversation for a while. Nathan spent most of the reception aware of where Emily was. Not anxiously, not the way you track something you're afraid of losing, but the way you're aware of a fire in a room, a warmth you orient toward without deciding to. She was in her element, moving through her people, her laugh the real one, unedited, the cracked bell sound. He watched her from across the room and thought about the promise in the store window and the 8-year-old who had written it with the wrong spelling and the right intention, and thought that some things take the exact amount of time they need, no less, no more. Lily found him standing there watching. You're doing the staring thing, she said. I'm appreciating, he said. It looks the same, she said. He put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him in the easy way she'd come back to, the way she hadn't for months after January, the leaning that said the ground was solid and could be trusted. You know what Emily told me? Lily said. What? She said the bakery is going to need a better second person eventually, when she's too busy. Lily was looking at the crowd, casual, not quite casual enough. She said she was going to need to teach someone properly. Nathan looked down at her. She was just saying it, Lily said. Right, Nathan said. It wasn't a promise or anything. Of course not. Lily nodded, leaned further into him. But probably a veterinarian baker would be useful, she said. Probably, Nathan agreed. Across the party, Emily caught his eye. He didn't know exactly what she read in his expression, but she smiled, the full one, the real one, and turned back to her conversation, and Nathan stood in the April evening with his daughter against his side and thought about the thing his therapist had said a year ago, stopping long enough to be somewhere. He was somewhere. He had been somewhere for a year. He intended to keep being somewhere for every year after this one, in a town that had remembered him before the money, in a bakery that smelled like vanilla and warm bread, beside a woman who told him true things, raising a daughter who had decided the world made sense again and had the striped rock in her pocket to prove it. In the kitchen of the house on Maple Street, eventually not a rental, eventually fully theirs, the oak tree in the yard still climbable and still being climbed, the purple crayon promise hung in its frame beside the window where the morning light came through. It was not on the best wall, not prominently placed. It was in the kitchen because that was where most of the real things happened. The cooking and the arguing and the homework and the ordinary days that turned out to be the whole point. When Lily asked about it, which she did, periodically, because she was a child who wanted to understand the history of the things around her, Nathan would take it off the wall and hand it to her and let her read it with her too serious 8-year-old face, the misspellings included. Did you really promise this? She asked one evening, homework spread across the table, the bakery's closing sounds still hanging in the air because Emily had stayed for dinner. I wrote it, Nathan said. I don't remember writing it, but it was mine. But you meant it? He looked at Emily, who was at the counter, not quite listening and absolutely listening. She glanced up, held his look. I meant something by it, Nathan said, looking back at Lily. I didn't know the word for what I meant yet. I just knew the feeling, and the closest word I had was that one. Lily looked at the paper for another moment, then she handed it back. The most important part wasn't making the promise, Nathan said, putting it back on its nail. It was keeping it, Lily said. He looked at her. You've said that before, she said. Once, I think, or maybe I just knew you were going to say it. Emily, at the counter. She knew. Obviously she knew, Nathan said. She's your kid, Emily said. Lily, between them, said nothing, only picked up her pencil and went back to her homework with the satisfied expression of a person who has ended up exactly where they intended, even if the route had been, at times, longer and stranger and harder than anyone would have chosen. Outside, Cedar Creek made its evening sounds, the diner closing up, the creek running somewhere at the edge of the town, the last light going from gold to dark in the ordinary way of days that add up, one by one, into something worth keeping.